Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1258 of the War News stream. And today we've gotten big news from around the world. Russia's preparing a possible false flag attack on ships very soon. Also, U.S. officials have threatened India over Russian oil, and an Iranian missile site exploded today in spectacular fashion after some mysterious drones were spotted in the area. We got big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to see that the Russian Federation is continuing to make bold and aggressive actions against the entirety of Eastern Europe and at large the NATO alliance over the past 48 hours. As we have been able to hear that 48 hours ago, the Russian Federation, through official notice of the Russian Foreign Ministry, has announced their withdrawal on the moratorium of the deployment of intermediate range and short-range ballistic missiles towards the European theaters. This means that the Russian Federation at this moment is deploying short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missile launcher systems and missile systems in general towards the direction of Eastern Europe in preparation for future actions to be made. This all coming in light of the future Zapad 2025 military exercises, where the Russian Federation and Belarus will be hosting tens of thousands of armed forces within the northwestern corner of Belarus near to the city of Grodno, incredibly close to the Suwalki Gap, to simulate a hypothetical invasion of Poland and the Baltic states and a seizure of the Suwalki Gap. We have also been able to hear at the exact same time that the Russian Federation is now publishing information about a supposed false flag attack that will be conducted in the future, as they state that the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is going to start a bombing campaign against merchant vessels throughout the entirety of the North Atlantic and North Sea to attempt to pin the blame onto the Russian Federation, whether sanctions go forward or not. This appears to be an attempt by the Russian Federation to lay out a plausible framework to be able to explain away false flag actions that will be conducted here within the future, possibly. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear that the United States of America is hastily trying to take some last-minute diplomatic diplomatic actions as the Friday deadline nears for the Russian Federation to either seek a ceasefire in the war in Ukraine or to continue on the war but suffer crippling sanctions from the United States of America. From what we've been able to hear, the U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff has arrived within the area of the Russian Federation to be able to prepare for talks with the Russian government to see if there's any sort of a ceasefire that can be made. We're already hearing that the president of the Russian Federation appears to be largely not believing the threats of the United States of America, and for this reason we believe the diplomatic efforts will be incredibly minimal and not successful. We have also been able to hear in the meantime that the Republic of India is further bolstering Russia's financial position as they have put out an official statement from their foreign ministry stating that they will not be stopping the purchase of Russian oils even in light of the threats of U.S. sanctions. This also brings up other breaking news from the region, as we have been able to hear that within the area of Jammu and Kashmir, near to the small village town of Poonch, a large firefight has now broken out between Indian and Pakistani forces. Video and picture evidence shows heavy fire being returned in both directions, but from what we can generally tell, at least at the moment, it is unclear who actually started the outbreak of fire within the region. It could have been the Pakistanis, it could have been the Indians. Both sides are claiming that the other broke the ceasefire first, at least according to media reports from both countries, but it's incredibly unclear whether this is going to restart the war between Pakistan and India or whether this is going to remain a limited border skirmish at best on the Jammu and Kashmir line of contact. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear that the Islamic Republic of Iran has suffered a significant blow inside of the city of Shiraz, as we have been able to see that some sort of unidentified drones have started to swarm into the region and have slammed directly into some sort of a military facility within the city of Shiraz. We are not entirely sure, at least at the moment, whose drones they were, but it does appear that the drones are directly involved in the strikes or explosions that happened directly inside of Shiraz. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran in general that the Iranians are now stating that there will be no IAEA inspections, while at the same time Israel is moving towards a complete annexation and occupation of the Gaza Strip. We have also been able to hear major news that the People's Republic of China has conducted a naval invasion, well, not naval invasion, correction folks, a naval exercise in the area of the southern Taiwan Strait, while at the same time we have also been able to hear the Ukrainian armed forces have continued to hold the lines and inflict significant damage on the Russian Federation armed forces over the past 24 hours. We have a large amount of news to cover, and really quickly before we move on into the news, I do have to say that for some reason YouTube is broken. Either the chat is going so quickly that the live chat is now broken. It appears to have completely stopped, and I'm not seeing any action or any chats coming in through the live chat, and it also appears that our reporting figures for folks in the viewership is also glitching as well heavily, as it is not really reflecting an accurate number, at least at the moment. We're not entirely sure what
It looks like on my end, it looks like the chat is totally stopped. I can't see anything in the control panel, nor in the actual YouTube dialogue either. So I'm not sure what's up with that. I can't chat or anything. So I think YouTube might actually be broken.
And it does appear that YouTube is broken for the moment. We are going to be pressing on forward with our normal nightly show, but it does appear to be an incredibly odd occurrence, at least in the moment, and I really do not have any good explanation as to why that is going on. An incredible large apology to everyone in the chat right now who is wanting to type in the live chat and talk about what's going on in the news, but unfortunately it appears that YouTube is suffering some sort of a significant glitch. But we will be getting on into the major news of the past 24 hours, while hopefully YouTube fixes that issue or finds some way to solve it. But moving on into the major news that we have had over the past 24 hours, we are going to be going directly into the Russian Federation, as we have been able to hear of significant actions and developments that have been happening within the area of Moscow. As we have been able to hear, now the chat is going 9 million miles an hour.
Holy smokes.
Here they go.
Look at that, man. This thing's going 1,000 chats a minute. Do you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it was literally an explosion. Pretty wild stuff. I haven't seen that ever, actually. But it does appear that everything is now reporting A-OK and just dandy. So now that that's all done with and the live chat is now working, thankfully, we will be able to press forward with our news. And also, Matthew, hopefully you'll be able to press forward with some of our first polls, because some of the spiciest topics of the night are coming up first, at least as far as foreign policy developments with the Russian Federation. I don't know if Matthew's ability to put polls in the live chat was affected by that, but hopefully...
We are A-OK.
We are A-OK. A-okay. So we are going to be pressing on. So sorry about that glitch, everyone. I do not know what that was or why in the world that's happening, but hopefully YouTube found the fix to that, and everything's running smoothly now. It actually appears that it may have stopped again. So we're just going
Oh my God.
we're gonna just keep pressing forward, and hopefully it works through the night. Very sorry about the glitches, everyone. That's entirely out of our control. But moving on from that and into the area of Western Moscow, where we put out some of the larger developments, at least at this moment. As of 48 hours ago, we were able to hear that Russia is now going to be removing themselves from the moratorium on the deployment of intermediate range and short range ballistic missiles to the area of Europe. This news is quite significant, as we were able to hear that according to the Russian Foreign Ministry, Russia has unilaterally removed itself from the moratorium on the ban on the deployment of medium and short range ballistic missile systems into Europe. This is a fairly significant action and one that's quite concerning, as this does mean that at this moment, according to Russian doctrinal or strategic practice, the Russian Federation can now deploy ground and air-launched short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles into the area of Eastern Europe. This is a fairly significant development, and one that happened about 48 to 36 hours ago, but nevertheless, the impact on the situation in Eastern Europe is going to be quite profound, at least from a strategic level. We generally understand that at the moment, the Russian Federation has a significant number of armed forces along the Baltic states' borders of Estonia and Latvia, and also has a significant basing of forces within the Kaliningrad military Oblast, with around an additional 110,000 Russian soldiers based in forward operating bases and facilities dotting the Finnish border. This means that at this moment, the Russian Federation is now able to mobilize and move into position ground-based Iskander transport-erector launchers, along with other types of short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missile launchers and systems, to be able to put them into where they would be needed if a war was to actually break out. This is a fairly significant move, and it's one that we have to explore the strategic implications of to quite a large degree, as it doesn't sound like a lot on the surface, but once you start to realize the true implications of this, it starts to become incredibly concerning and quite alarming, to be entirely honest with y'all. We do understand, to give y'all a little bit of the outline of the situation leading up to this, that war in Europe is a greater certainty now than it has been over the past 30 years since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Tensions have been continuously rising between the NATO alliance and that of the Russian Federation, or the Russian-led CSTO, including Belarus, which is the Russian equivalent to NATO, since the beginning of the war in Ukraine in February of 2022. Over time, we have been able to see satellite and picture evidence showing us that while the Russians are continuing their long and grueling war in Ukraine that is making it practically nowhere, they are also continuing to build up forces within the Kaliningrad, Baltic state borders, and Finnish borders at the same time, with satellite picture and photography proving that the Russian Federation has actually built up a significant garrison of around 110,000 soldiers dotted along multiple forward operating bases and facilities near to the southern Finnish border and around the central Finnish border. This is an incredibly significant development, if any, as we are already seeing that the Russian Federation is beginning to force posture themselves in a threatening manner, not only against Finland, but the Baltic states and Poland as well, in terms of conventional armed forces and numbers. Not only that, we have also been able to hear at the exact same moment in time, actually not the exact same moment in time, a little bit later on down the road after that, that in 2024, around June, the Russian Federation redrew their military district maps, breaking apart the central military district and turning it into two separate military districts, the Moscow military district and the Leningrad military district. The Leningrad military district appears to be charged with the responsibility of preparing and planning for an eventual war with NATO, as it is the only military district within the Russian Federation that borders NATO entirely, and it does appear that from what we can tell, that is the entire sole purpose of the Leningrad military district, with the newly formed Moscow military district serving as a surge military district to put Russia's quote-unquote best units, or best preserved units at this point, to be able to divert them either to the war in Ukraine or the possibility of the war in Europe that the Leningrad military district would be in charge of conducting. That was a fairly significant development, at least on a strategic and doctrinal level. Now, recently, We have started to hear that the Russian Federation will be conducting the Zapad 2025 military exercises within the area of northwestern Belarus. These are usually an annual military exercise conducted around the same time every year, but according to information that we are getting this year from multiple sources and intelligence reports, it appears that this Zapad 2025 military exercise is going to be far larger than expected, and we are most likely going to be seeing tens of thousands of Russian soldiers, along with Belarusian soldiers, basing and operating around the Grodno city area, which is dangerously close to the Suwalki Gap, including the large amount of forces that are also now present within the Kaliningrad region, or the Kaliningrad Oblast. This could highly likely be an expected invasion of the Suwalki Gap, which the European Union's parliament has spoken about in detail and has stated that it is a situation of great concern, not only to the security of the economic apparatus of the European Union, but in extension, the defense apparatus of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, just 2 days ago, we were able to hear that the Russian Federation is now removing the moratorium on the deployment of those short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles. And this is largely sealing the deal that, at least at this point, the Russian Federation is truly preparing for a war against NATO. Whether or not that war will happen is largely up to the books of history. But as far as their ability to be able to conduct this war and the sort of preparatory actions that they would need to make to be able to press forward with a war against Europe, most if not all of them have been made. To remind you all of the Russian strategy at the beginning of the war in Ukraine, on the 23rd of February of 2022, Ukraine was woken up in the middle of the dead of night by dozens, if not hundreds, of ballistic missiles and cruise missiles being fired from the Russian Navy, the Russian Air Force, and the Russian ground forces at what was deemed to be strategic targets throughout the entirety of Ukraine. Within the first explosion, around 20 minutes later, the Russian armed forces began to cross the Ukrainian borders on all fronts, from the north in Belarus to the east around Sumy, Chernihiv, and Kharkiv, and from the south from the Crimean Peninsula and on towards Kherson, Melitopol, and Zaporizhia. That offensive was preceded, however, by a large launch of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, meaning that as far as the Russian modern doctrine is concerned, much like any modern doctrine, it usually is a shock and awe campaign attempting to leverage superior firepower to disorient and damage enemy forces before conducting an offensive, immediately followed upon by rapid offensive actions to try and overwhelm and knock out these disoriented and confused forces that they would be going up against, at least in theory. This is also something that we've seen in other prior conflicts, including those between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the State of Israel, where the opening actions of the 12-day war involved significant airstrikes and missile launches by both the State of Israel and the Islamic Republic of Iran. Such a similar action was also seen in this channel's history of news coverage between the Islamic Republic of Pakistan and the Republic of India, with both of them firing off significant cruise missile and ballistic missile volleys at each other before commencing in heavy border skirmishes and also air combat within the areas of the Rajasthan and Punjab regions. We also have seen this very similar thing conducted by the United States of America's armed forces in the invasion of Iraq in 2003 and in the Gulf War in 1991. All historical examples do go to show that if one is going to be conducting the outbreak of a new conflict, it is generally always seen that some sort of a preparatory airstrike or bombardment of some sort is conducted against enemy forces before an offensive begins. The removing of this moratorium allows for the Russian Federation to pose and set up their forces within the Russian Federation that could launch these missiles into Eastern Europe and precede the actual ground invasion that would be happening. Not only that, but the Russian Federation has also laid out a fairly significant sort of a statement as well today against the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. This is directly from the Russian Federation. And according to a statement put out by the Russians, and I quote, we're going to only quote the significant portions, the execution of both terrorist attacks London intends to instruct the Ukrainian security forces, their expected dirty work and the inability to blind traces are considered by the British as a guarantee of their own impunity. The international investigation will lay responsibility for the disaster disaster on Russia, or in the worst case, in Ukraine, by analogy with the undermining of the Nord Stream. The moment for the attack in the UK intends to be selected in order to use the media effect of it to pressure the administration of the President of the United States. The goal is to force the United States to take the most severe secondary sanctions against buyers of Russian energy resources. The Russian Federation appears to already be, in the statement, trying to set up a false flag attack where they will be able to conduct an attack on some form of merchant shipping within the North Atlantic or the North Sea, and then attempt to use that as a unwarranted justification, in their words, by the British nation to then be able to prepare for some sort of a larger conflict throughout the whole of Europe. This statement is quite concerning, and it's also being followed by additional threats that have been made by Dmitry Medvedev, which I didn't include here on the stream tonight, but they are accessible on our Twitter with the link in the description below. All of this does seem to be showing us that tensions are, of course, continuing to rise between the United States of America and the Russian Federation. And it does appear that a lot of people have been talking about this instance at the moment and what the United States' future response is going to be, considering all of these Russian provocative actions that have been made only in the last 48 hours alone. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so now that Medvedev is back to threatening the United States yet again, he didn't learn the first time. He's back to it a second time, which is obviously not very smart. But Medvedev did threaten today with a new missile threat toward the United States, even after the nuclear subs were sent just a couple of days ago to Russia's coast, at least publicly speaking. And what are your thoughts about this new development? So 45% said the U.S. will escalate on Russia again, more than just the nuclear subs, and 30% said the U.S. will ignore it this time, and 18% said only time's going to tell what the U.S. is going to do in response to Medvedev's reckless statements. Now, Medvedev made the statement specifically referring to the withdrawal of the moratorium on the deployment of medium and short-range ballistic missiles, and he claimed that was because NATO has an anti-Russia policy. But breaking news from Medvedev, it's not an anti-Russia policy, it's an anti-dictatorship policy, and it's an anti-invasion policy. You can't go invade Ukraine, you can't invade NATO. If you do that, you're going to get a very, very strong response from the NATO alliance. That's not anti-Russia, that's just anti-invasion, basically. So I would say this: Medvedev is being allowed to go off the chain by Vladimir Putin, because Medvedev would not be saying this stuff unless he was given the green light by Vladimir Putin. So in my opinion, this is the same as Putin saying this out of his own mouth, but he's too cowardly to say it. So I think the U.S. is going to escalate on Russia again. Medvedev's statements were obviously taken seriously the first time, and they'll probably be taken seriously again this time with another round of escalations by the U.S. president. So I'm with the 46%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 46% as well. I do believe that the Russian Federation is most likely going to be forcing the United States' hand to escalate the situation once again, as a lot of their positions so far have been incredibly concerning. For one, they're now saying that the British are going to be conducting some level of a terroristic attack against commercial shipping to try and force the United States of America to leverage sanctions on the Russian Federation, which the Russians are making quite clear at this point they would consider the outbreak of war, and they will be going into some sort of a conventional conflict with NATO, clearly showing that they're already trying to set up their ducks in a row, in the best phrase or old saying, to be able to get ready for a war with NATO. Not only that, they lifted the moratorium on the deployment of short-range ballistic missiles and intermediate-range ballistic missiles, and the raving drunkard is back on Twitter again, continuing to make extreme threats towards the United States of America and the President of the United States, who is the elected representative of all citizens of the United States of America during his term. With that in mind, it's quite clear that the Russian Federation is not really leaving a lot of ground, at least at this moment, for the United States to generally try and back off or find some sort of a common diplomatic negotiating ground with the Russian Federation. If anything, the Russians are continuously showing that war is on the horizon at this point, against not only the entirety of Eastern Europe, but also against the United States and NATO in general. For this reason, I would have to say that I believe that the United States is going to be forced to escalate against the Russian Federation, and I have a feeling that once the 8th of August comes around, we will most likely be seeing the implementation of greater secondary sanctions against the Russian Federation and their oil markets that they continue to operate or largely exploit around the world to be able to continue to finance their military operations, at least to some limited extent. However,
you know what's crazy though? I do want to point this out real quick. Tomorrow, which is Wednesday, there is a planned meeting in Moscow between the U.S. envoy and the Russian Federation. So even though Medvedev is making these wild statements today, and I'll be honest, I think the U.S. envoy was already on their way to Russia when that statement was made by Medvedev, so they didn't want to pull out of the trip. But, obviously Medvedev's still mouthing off like a lunatic, and we're still going over to Moscow to try to talk to Vladimir Putin, even in the midst of that. So the U.S. is still trying to talk. Like, that's the point I was trying to make here. They're still trying to talk, even in the midst of all this stuff going on, even in the midst of sending nuclear submarines to the Russian coast and announcing that publicly. It's kind of crazy that we're still trying to talk to them at this point.
I find it a little bit crazy. And speaking of that, we were able to hear that the U.S. envoy is currently meeting with the Russian Federation as of tomorrow, according to what we know. This is a special envoy Witkoff, which I have to say that his works in the Middle East have not really been the most impressive. I generally surmised him as a failure. And also considering that, we're also hearing that the president of the Russian Federation is also doubting that the ultimatums are even serious, or that the potency of these threats is going to be so weak that the threat shouldn't even be taken seriously. We also are hearing on top of that the Russian Federation is going to attempt to toy with the United States by considering a limited air truce with Ukraine, at least halting drone and missile strikes as a gesture to the president while continuing the war, at least as a rumor that's going around about a possible solution that the Russian Federation may try and push forward. But at the same time, we've also been able to hear this one once again. This is nothing new. Putin is now stating that he's ready to meet with Ukrainian President Zelensky after preparatory work at the expert level. All of this coming just days up till the August 8th deadline, where secondary sanctions are most likely going to be implemented against the Russian Federation because of their continued war in Ukraine. I do have to say, however, folks, that my belief that there will be any sort of a negotiated end to this conflict, or even any sort of a light negotiated ceasefire that would stand, is incredibly minimal. We've already seen that inside the Middle East, a special envoy, Steve Witkoff, has not really been able to achieve a lot of the primary goals or strategic ambitions of the United States within this region, either with the Islamic Republic of Iran, or inside of Syria with the Syrian interim government, or anywhere else throughout the region, or with the Yemeni Houthis. Generally, it seems as though the special envoy has not really been able to achieve much, if anything at all. And so for that reason, just based off of that track record in the Middle East alone, I would assume that nothing's going to be achieved tomorrow in the Russian Federation. I would have to say that at best, at least from what we can tell by performance so far, Witkoff is about 3-0, 3 defeats to no diplomatic victories at this moment. And so based off a 100% failure rate, we would generally assume that the special envoy is going to have a 100% failure rate tomorrow, just based off of statistical probability. However, we also have to consider that the Russian Federation is already on a footing where they're not really going to be giving out any good ideas or any good faith representations of the Russian Federation and an actual desire for peace. With that in mind as well, I would generally also say that this would have a 0% chance of success. We generally have a fairly inexperienced special envoy that has had a very low rate of success inside the Middle East. Now going to the Russian Federation, with the Russian Federation already making it clear that they are not looking for any kind of an actual peace, and if anything, it's going to be a token peace, just to try and either insult the United States of America or to create something that will really more so benefit the Russians than the Ukrainians. And if the United States is not able to meet them pretty much most of the way towards Russia's side on that regard, they're going to keep the war going in full scale until it eventually ends either in the Russian economic collapse or in some sort of a surprise victory for the Russian Federation, which is highly unlikely. I also want to point out as well that while all of this is going on, the Russian Federation has been trying to position themselves as economically, I guess you could say, strong or fortified as possible, and it does appear that they've been able to get a little bit of somewhere, at least with the Republic of India. We already know that the official answer by the People's Republic of China is that they will continue to buy and import Russian oils and gases from the Russian Federation, largely supporting Russia's efforts in the war financially, but generally it's been up in the air whether or not the Republic of India will also do the same. And we did hear statements from days ago that the President of the United States declared victory and stated that the Republic of India would no longer be buying any Russian oils or gases, and for that reason, that was another significant economic blow to the Russian Federation. And it does appear that at least at this moment, the Republic of India has started to give the Russians a lot more of a clear sign, and this is what we've been able to hear from the Indian Foreign Ministry. And I'm going to read the entire statement just to make it a little bit clear, the exact position of the Indian government, at least at this moment. India has been targeted by the United States and the European European Union for importing oil from Russia after the commencement of the Ukraine conflict. In fact, India began importing from Russia because traditional supplies were diverted to Europe after the outbreak of the conflict. The United States at that time actively encouraged such imports by India for strengthening global energy market stability. India's imports are meant to ensure predictability and affordable energy costs to the Indian consumer. They are a necessity compelled by global market situations. However, it is revealing that the very nations criticizing India are themselves indulging in trade with Russia. Unlike our case, such trade is not even a vital national compulsion. The European Union in 2024 had a bilateral trade of euros worth 67.5 billion in goods with Russia. In addition, it had services estimated at around 17.2 billion euros in 2023. This is significantly more than India's total trade with Russia that year or subsequently. European imports of liquefied natural gas in 2024, in fact, reached a record 16.5 million metric tons, surpassing the last record of 15.2 million metric tons in 2022. Europe-Russia trade includes not just energy, but also fertilizers, mining products, chemicals, iron and steel, and machinery and transport equipment. Where the United States is concerned, it continues to import from Russia uranium hexafluoride for its nuclear industry, palladium for its EV industry, fertilizers, as well as chemicals. In this background, the targeting of India is unjustified and unreasonable. Like any major economy, India will take all necessary measures to safeguard its national interest and economic security. So it appears that the Indians have made it quite clear they are going to be financially bankrolling the Russian Federation's continued war in Ukraine by that statement. And that generally starts to put the ball into Russia's court, or more so, back onto the question of whether or not the Russian Federation would try and conduct a false flag attack, claiming that the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland actually ended up blowing up a merchant vessel somewhere in the North Atlantic to try and justify a greater conflict, considering that sanctions may have a limited impact, considering that two of Russia's largest trading partners in terms of their petroleum are continuing to say that they will buy Russian petroleum even after the sanctions go into effect. Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about this as well?
So I'll be honest, I don't know much, but one thing I do know is literally everything is breaking on me tonight. The poll's not working properly, the live chat's not working, and also all my spreadsheets are lagging for some reason. So I'm not sure if maybe the world's under a cyber attack or what, but it's quite terrible. And the poll's working about like the Russian economy. It's just completely breaking. But for what we see right now in the poll, and once again, the question says, Russia claims that Britain plans to attack oil tankers to frame Russia for the attacks, basically a false flag attack. And what are your thoughts? About 59% said Russia is planning a false flag attack, while 23% said it's just a scary statement only, and it's just words, and 11% said it sounds ominous, but we need some more information. And I'll be honest with you, like I said in the short video earlier today, this sounds like literally the groundwork plans for a false flag attack. It's giving Russia the option to at least go forth in the future and say that we told everybody this was going to happen, that Britain was allegedly going to attack our ships, and now we can finally say that, and now there's a reason to go to war with NATO. That sounds to me like what they're trying to set up here. Now, whether or not they carried out and actually follow through, that's another question, but it does appear to be a false flag, at least attempt, in my view. So I'm with the 59%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that very rarely am I one to say that a false flag attack is ever conducted. Usually, what you see is what you get. That's generally the kind of diplomatic rule, or sort of a national news rule that you want to work with, is that whatever you're seeing right in front of your eyes that is happening is exactly what's happening. There's nothing below the surface. It is directly what it is. However, it does appear that at least at the moment, the Russian Federation, with that official statement that they made from the CSTO today, are making it incredibly clear that they are lining up for a false flag attack. They are already trying to lay out the diplomatic framework for a justifiable casus belli against NATO because of an action that would be claimed to be conducted by the United Kingdom, but on the other hand, was conducted by the Russian Federation themselves to try and start off this war. This is not something that is foreign to history. It is quite rarely done. At least in terms of the starts of conflicts, it is quite truly a unicorn, but it has been conducted. Most importantly, in the year 2000, the Belsan apartment bombings in Moscow, which ended up killing 500 people, were actually attributed not to Chechen terrorists from the semi-autonomous Republic of Chechnya. It actually apparently was conducted by the Russian FSB as some sort of a justification to be able to take further military action inside of the Republic of Chechnya and to start off the Second Chechen War. We also understand that in times way prior, actually leading up to the Second World War, the Empire of Japan also conducted a false flag attack of its own, actually bombing one of its own express trains within northern Manchuria, and then claiming that this was an action conducted by the fiends of Chiang Kai-shek's government in the Republic of China, largely leading up to a creation of the Marco Polo Bridge incident, and then the greater outbreak of the Second World War across the entirety of East Asia. So, at least historically, we can point out about 2 incidents within the past century that would be seen as direct false flags, that are provable as false flags, that were conducted for the purpose of justifying a proper casus belli. When a country needs to conduct offensive action against another, at least in the modern day, it is much easier to try and justify that as a defensive action, even if it is preemptive or offensive, than it is to purely justify it as an offensive action. With the current metrics that the Russian Federation is trying to lay out with this statement that they made about the British today, this is how it will work diplomatically, if it was to be followed through on. The Russian Federation will plant a bomb on a merchant ship. That merchant ship will set out to sea, or they will torpedo one, and it will get blown up and then rapidly sink. The crew members will most likely end up getting wounded and killed, and the Russian Federation will say that this was one of our vessels transiting through the North Atlantic or the North Sea in international waters under international law, and our independent investigation has concluded that the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland conducted a terrorist attack against one of our merchant vessels. The United Kingdom is, of course, going to openly deny that because they were not involved in the attack, but the Russian Federation will now be able to say the United Kingdom, through largely the actions of themselves or the greater actions of a unified front against Russia in NATO, conducted this attack, and for this reason, we are going to respond. That would then give them the proper casus belli to make it look like it's a defensive war, but in reality, they largely were looking for an excuse to start an offensive conflict, or they would start to push into the Baltics and Poland and start off pretty much a third world war. That generally seems to be the case, and so for that reason, I would have to say that I'm with the 57%. The Russians appear to be planning a false flag attack, at least at the moment, and that statement is probably the most telltale sign that we've ever had that the Russians would be planning a false flag attack. But still, with that, I hope that explores that sort of an opportunity, at least for the Russians, somewhat well, and maybe it might not happen, considering that a lot of people are most likely going to be catching on to that, and considering it a false flag, they may not actually decide to follow through with it. But we do know, as a matter of fact, that there are other countries that have conducted bombings like these to make their message clear. North Korea actually did bomb some civilian airliners heading to South Korea during the earlier part of the 1980s, simply to send a message that they did not like the idea of the Olympics being hosted in Seoul in 1986. So it is entirely possible that the Russian Federation could conduct these sorts of actions just to try and get back at the West or to create a proper casus belli. Nevertheless, moving on from that and on into some more major news that we've also been able to hear over the course of the day, we have been able to hear, making sure we covered everything in Moscow so far, that there is a little bit of a roadblock that the Russians are running into, at least domestically at the moment. KAMAZ, which is one of the largest truck manufacturers in the Russian Federation, is actually collapsing at this moment. KAMAZ has reported that within the course of this 1 year alone, they have suffered $200 million of net loss in about 7 months. That's only half of the year. This is the largest loss that KAMAZ has ever financially taken in its history since 1991. And this is actually quite a significant one. This is wiping out years of profits that KAMAZ has made. KAMAZ in general usually makes around $40 to $50 million in actual net profit annually. And considering that they are stating that they have now taken around $238 million in losses in the first half of this year, is actually wiping out about 8 to 9 years worth of revenue or profits that they have made as a company. This is something that is so severe that KAMAZ might actually be moving into receivership here incredibly soon. We already know that they have cut down their working weeks from 5 days to 4, an attempt to cut down on the hemorrhaging of the money that is happening inside of KAMAZ, but not really much more can be done beyond that. If they cut down the working day weeks to 3, most of their workers are going to be trying to find other jobs, which will start to create assembly line stoppages, shortages, and a great deal of other issues that will pretty much force KAMAZ into receivership at that point. So at this moment in time, we're actually hearing that while the Russians are trying to insist that their financial situation is strong, Hamas has now also come out and has made it quite clear that the economic situation in the Russian Federation is so untenable that the largest and one of the most historically important truck manufacturers inside the Russian Federation might be going into receivership or complete collapse here incredibly soon. This also brings us on into something else that is quite significant inside the Russian Federation as well. As we've been able to hear that the Russian Federation has now removed their moratorium on the deployment of short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles into the area of Europe, we have also been able to hear that they announced that their Su-57s, which generally are not stealth, I'd say that the best thing that we could describe them as is a stylized aircraft, or a stylized air superiority aircraft, are apparently now able to carry some sort of a new hypersonic missile that is similar to the Zircon, but not entirely the same. Apparently, this is the first time that a quote-unquote stealth jet is able to carry a hypersonic missile, but the problem with that is that this jet is not stealth. Sukhoi even reports that its radar cross-section is the size of an F-15, and just looking at it simply from here, you can clearly tell that it's not stealth. There are exposed rivets. There are also non-jagged edges. And some of y'all might be interested, why in the world would a jagged edge make an importance or difference on the Su-57? A straight edge, any kind of a straight edge that generally isn't jagged or has a incredibly odd geometry, will actually reflect a radar cross-section. This means that any sort of a flat or straight edge on an aircraft will reflect a very significant radar cross-section. That's why if you look at aircraft like the F-35, you'll see that most panels and hatches on the F-35 actually have angular shapes to them, which you can see right here with a zigzag patch or panel on them. That is made so that way when the radar beam starts to hit this hatch, a decent amount of the radar's beam is actually diffracted in a different direction than the sensor on the radar. This means that it doesn't really report back a large cross-section, or the cross-section is noticeably smaller. The Su-57 doesn't have any of those features. Every single one of its panels and hatches is perfectly square or geometric, meaning that this reflects an incredibly high cross-section just because of that fact alone. Not only that, we don't have to go into all of the design features from here and there to be able to say that this aircraft is not stealth. Sukhoi reports it's not stealth. They're the designers of the aircraft. If they're stating that the cross-section is as big as an F-15, then we know it's probably even larger than an F-15, because the Russians generally, including Sukhoi, have a noted important reason to be able to try and overstate the abilities of their weapon systems, to try and conduct psychological warfare against the Western world and to make them think twice about a possible confrontation with the Russians. But still, this generally doesn't seem to be that big of a game changer. We were able to hear, however, that near to the area of the Kasputin Yar range, which is in the Otabinsk Air Base, which houses most of these Su-57s, from the 4th to the 8th of August, Russia is closing the airspace around Kasputin Yar, most likely for tests of ballistic missiles, or possibly even testing the weapon systems that are supposedly new and to be mounted onto that of the Su-57. With that in mind, an incredibly interesting sort of a thing to hear, and it is showing us that the Russian Federation is still attempting to move forward with showing that they are deploying a greater deal of short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles, including those with hypersonic abilities, throughout the entirety of Europe, and also trying to showcase their abilities. Outside of that, however, the situation with India has been dominating a lot of minds, because while the Russian Federation is largely, generally showing that they will carry on with the war in Ukraine, and may even expand into a war in Europe, it is not in any less part because of China's and India's need or necessity to continue to buy Russian oil, to the point that even the threat of U.S. sanctions will not deter them from their continued purchases of Russian oils and liquefied natural gas, which is helping to finance the Russian Federation's war in Ukraine. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this? Are people thinking that the United States is going to be hitting India with substantial tariffs because they are going to be violating the sanctions against the Russian Federation, or that we won't? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So it looks like 61% of the audience said that's a good move. The U.S. should use sanctions on them to bring them to basically stop buying Russian oil inside of India, while 23% said that's a bad move. We shouldn't make India an enemy. We should instead negotiate with them. And 8% said, I'm neutral on this one. Now, here's the thing on this situation as a whole. If India stops buying Russian oil, they stand to lose billions of dollars. We've already heard that from economists. So it doesn't make sense for India to stop buying the Russian oil. So unless there's some type of pressure that is put on India to stop doing it, like for example, sanctions or tariffs, then it is highly unlikely that India is going to stop buying Russian oil. So we need them to stop buying it because if we take away India, like think of it like a Jenga block tower, China is at the top, we have India in the middle, and we have Turkey at the bottom. If you can take out that Jenga block, which is India, of the Russian oil sales, that is going to cause that tower to potentially come crashing down and hurt the Russian economy significantly. So it's extremely important to have India stop buying that oil, and they're the best chance that we have to actually get that country out of purchasing Russian oil. So I would say it's a good move. We should use sanctions on them. There's really no hope that diplomacy could work here because it doesn't make sense for India to stop purchasing the oil from an economic standpoint. So I'm with the 63%. Unfortunately, it is required to do that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it would be incredibly important to be able to knock out India and China as oil consumers. Here's actually a chart here, one of the most recent that I could find, at least quickly, from around 2024, showing the billions dollars worth of euros of specific types of energy imports that are being imported from country to country. And as you will notice, in terms of crude oil, which both India and China are large consumers of, India purchases around $45 billion worth of crude oil annually, at least at this point right now, and the People's Republic of China is buying about $58 billion worth of crude oil annually from the Russian Federation. The two of them combined are pretty much bankrolling the Russian Federation. That is about $100 billion worth of value in trade alone just from the crude oil. That's not including oil products in general, or liquefied natural gas, or coal for that matter, which also adds a decent little extra tidy sum to the overall amount that Russia is making from the trade with the Chinese and the Indians. The Russian Federation has to be strangled economically to be able to force an end to the war. If the Russians are able to keep some money rolling into the Russian Federation, they can divert all of that into largely the armed forces and completely neglect everything else for years and try and keep the war going somehow, some way, meaning that it might go on with no end in sight. If Russia financially collapses because the Indians or the Chinese, which are their largest consumers of crude oil, stop consuming crude oil, that generally means that the Russian Federation will no longer be able to financially continue on the war, as domestically their economy would be collapsing. The signs are already clearly showing, and if we were able to see that the Republic of India and China stop being trading partners with the Russians for their crude oil, that economic backslide or complete collapse will coalesce a lot quicker than it would otherwise. So for that reason, we need to see that the Republic of India stops their trade with the Russian Federation at all costs. And if the United States has to implement crippling sanctions against the Republic of India, then that's what we have to do. I generally would say, however, that the Republic of India...
And
Go ahead.
And also, by the way, I saw here that B. Woodward said in the live chat, he said the USA's got to think outside the box. He's talking about India purchasing U.S. oil, and we give them X. Now, Woodward, that is a good point, because obviously the U.S. can't tell India, you got to stop purchasing Russian oil, and we're going to leave you hanging. We can't do that, or that would be, in my opinion, a pretty aggressive action and probably piss India off quite a bit, and they would be rightfully pissed off about that. But we are going to sell them U.S. oil, and they've already bought tons of barrels of oil from the U.S. and also our other oil partners as well. So I believe we're giving them to giving it to them at a pretty equal price, I believe. Maybe we could knock the price down a little bit further to give India an incentive to buy more U.S. oil and also our partners' oil as well. Because if we give them that economic incentive, maybe that can offset some of their losses that they're going to take on the Russian oil that they're not purchasing anymore. Because right now, that's the main thing that Russia has over the West, is they have cheaper prices on the oil. It's easier for India to buy it, and that's why they've been buying it. So if we take away that incentive, maybe that would work. But also, I'm not really sure if India has a preference toward Russia or the West. It's not really clear, in my opinion, if they do. They kind of like ride the fence a little bit these days, and I really can't tell. But Enforcer, what do you think? Is India riding the fence, or are they on Russia's side, or what's their general stance?
Generally, India has been a fence rider, but now that a declaration has been given to the Indians that they need to stop trade with Russia, they're clearly siding with the Russians at this point, because their response was generally saying, oh, why in the world would we quit? y'all are hypocrites, screw you. That was generally their statement. So I would say that they're now starting to pretty much clearly side with the Russians. There really isn't a question involved at this point, which is why I'm saying that we should move forward with sanctions instead of trying to negotiate with them, because their response wasn't really one of negotiation. It was more so a response of, we'll do what we want, screw you people, and the only reason that we're doing any business with y'all at all is because we're inherently getting a benefit from it. Beyond that, we don't care of making any larger alliance or any sort of a greater value out of this relationship. On top of that, as far as our trade with India is concerned, it is quite low. India ranks number 10, even below the United Kingdom, Vietnam, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, Germany, China, Canada, Mexico, the entirety of the Asian Southeastern, well, let me make sure, Association of Southeast Asian Nations Alliance, as well as the European Union. So generally, they fall pretty low on the list. They're literally sandwiched between the UK and the Netherlands in terms of trade value. Not to say that the UK and the Netherlands are completely pointless for trade. There's a decent amount of value that we get out of the trade with the two countries, but nevertheless, India isn't a major one. We have a total trade in imports and exports with India of $129 billion. That is wildly insignificant compared to that of the People's Republic of China at $582 billion and the European Union at $976 billion, at least as of the numbers tabulated from 2024. So with that in mind, moving forward with sanctions on India is nothing too severe. We could easily start to move around that and start to find some ways to work around it, because the Republic of India generally doesn't trade heavily with the United States. We're actually not India's largest trading partner. India's largest trading partner is actually its surrounding neighbors for the larger part. The United States falls a couple of steps down the ring. So we do not have any sort of a large financial relationship with India, either on India's part or our part, so we can actually start to impact them with some sort of sanctions or tariffs. And if a larger amount of India's trading partners also stop trading with them because of those sanctions, that would put a lot of pressure onto the Republic of India, where they could be losing potentially tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of economic value and losses, to the point that it actually make more sense to buy European or U.S. oil than it would be to buy Russian oil. Or generally, that would be the greater approach.
Yeah, I'm still seeing a lot of people in the live chat. They're a little bit on the fence about where India sits geopolitically between the West and Russia and China's side. I would tend to argue that India was kind of on the fence before now. They sort of like rode a middle line between like halfway supporting Russia and halfway supporting the West, not almost actually kind of reminiscent of what Turkey does to a certain extent, slightly, not all the way, but sort of similar. But the one thing that does have me a bit concerned, though, is we are having this trade war situation with India, which is not good. We're now threatening to slap them with large tariffs over this whole situation about buying Russian oil. And just about 4 or 5 days ago, they informed the United States that they do not want to purchase the F-35 fighter jets, which that's a pretty big red flag right there, because apparently they don't trust us enough to buy our jets from us, or maybe they just got pissed off and they don't like the trade war and they don't want to buy any of our military equipment. Whatever the case is, it seems like maybe they are pushing away from the West a little bit. And that statement the enforcer was talking about that the Indian Economic Agency put out, the government agency, it makes it seem like India is getting really angry with the United States to the point where they could flip and actually take a side, which could be the Russian side, which wouldn't be good.
I would have to agree, and this is a situation that we can't really play around with too much. I also saw someone say something else about we should stop trade with China. This is the issue with that, though. It's a great idea on paper, and I generally like to see that China as a trading partner drops down into the lower 20s. But the problem with that is that China right now is one of our largest trading partners. As far as national trading partners go, China is number 3. If we were to include the community of Southeast Asian nations or the European Union, they're technically number 5. But still, they hold such a significant trading role with the United States that it would be pretty tough, if not impossible, to completely cut trade out with them right now without suffering supreme economic losses in the United States. Just look at the tariff scares of the earlier part of this year as an example when we started to implement high tariffs against the Chinese, and look at the economic fallout that followed after that. It was absolutely devastating, even in the short term. Well, not really devastating, but it was damaging, at least in the short term. So generally, we can't just cut trade with China and be like, okay, screw them, because there still is enough of an economic connection with them that's significant enough that that would be equally damaging to us as it would be to them. India, on the other hand, is not in that kind of a position. We can actually mess with India and toss them around a little bit on the economic stage, and it wouldn't really have that much of an impact on us. It would have a great impact on them because a total trade of $130 billion for a $3.5 trillion economy is quite severe. For the United States, it's something like a Tuesday. It's a small economic scare in terms of losses, but nothing major. For India, it is Black Friday or the Great Financial Collapse in 1929 for their sort of a scale or level. So that's generally why I would say that sanctions would be fine to implement against the Republic of India. And India has also got to understand that if they want to ride the fence, then they've got to actually ride the fence a little bit. They can't sit there and beg for the United States to be there to help them out when the Chinese are beating them with clubs up in the Himalayas or the Pakistanis are bullying them with Chinese support. If they want to be a part of this little BRICS community and keep getting their asses beat by all of their surrounding BRICS members, then they can't sit there and act like the United States is going to come to their aid in the future and try and help them out at some point. This is quite clear they don't have a future in BRICS, and at this moment they're also making it quite clear that they don't see a future in the West either. So as far as India's foreign policy position, I don't know what it even is, because it's quite clear the Chinese don't like them, and if the Chinese don't like you and you're in BRICS, you're not in BRICS, because China is the only actual economic player of any significant note or value in the entirety of the BRICS alliance. So I don't really know what is the point of that, at least is India's position right now, but we need to make it quite clear to them that we are not going to be messing around or playing around with the Indians. We're not going to always coddle them, because we've coddled them a lot, and I've been a huge proponent for coddling them because they are in a very special strategic position as far as the United States is concerned. But at this moment in time, they've made it clear with the statement they made out of the foreign ministry that they're largely siding with the Russians, and that they really don't consider the West to be that important. So now it's time for us to teach them, at least in a sense, how important the West is to their economic stability. And once they learn that, they might come around.
You got to admit it hurts a little bit, though, because a lot of American companies just tried to shift their manufacturing from China over to India, because a lot of American companies believed that geopolitically we're starting to have a big falling out with China, because before it was like a symbiotic relationship. We kind of had them as the manufacturing base. They'd sell all their stuff to America, and it wasn't really reciprocal. It was more like just China was selling stuff to us and we used them to manufacture pretty much everything in America. So the American company said, let's move our stuff to India, so that way we can try to safeguard our stuff and also try to search for lower prices. Of course, got to chase the bottom dollar, the bottom line, basically. So now India looks like they could be sort of pushing themselves away from the Western sphere to a certain extent, and all those companies are now finding themselves in probably a worse predicament than they were even in China at this point.
I would have to say that that is true. I would also have to add in on that I think as far as neutral economic partnerships that could be made that would have some value, a lot of U.S. manufacturers should consider moving their productions to Mexico, because as far as Mexico is going, things are on the up. Mexico is becoming a little bit more stable over the years. And as more companies are moving into Mexico, the Mexican government actually has an invested responsibility at that point to start stabilizing their country and pretty much open more areas to pretty much be industrialized or open for some sort of industrial manufacturing. Considering that Mexico is also directly bordering the United States, it guarantees they're never going to do anything stupid like join BRICS, because Papa USA, Uncle Sam, is literally sitting on top of them in terms of geography. So generally that would be a safe bet, but I would also have to say that with the Republic of India's current positioning, I don't really think that their manufacturing, U.S. companies' manufacturing would be safeguarded as far as their interests inside the Republic of India. I also see some people saying you could move the manufacturing to America. It's completely impossible. It's honestly a fantasy. I'll explain why really quickly. Really cool idea and notion. It would be neat to have made in USA on a lot of stuff, but here's the problem. American workers are too expensive. It's crazy, right? But it's true. Because Americans require fair working wages, which is something that I think is a necessity, a lot of companies don't like to do business here. And here's the issue. As far as America being open to trade, we have to be open to trade. That's the only way that a country makes money. But the problem with that is that because we're open to trade, countries like China or India or any other cheaper manufacturer, at least back in the day, was able to competitively outcompete the US companies that were manufacturing in America. Their products were cheaper, they were generally lower quality, but the consumer, according to all reports, goes for the cheaper product. So, with that in mind, a lot of American companies were like, damn, we are getting fleeced by these Chinese, Indian, and Vietnamese manufacturers. We just can't even keep up. So the only way that they could keep up is to go and try and get access to that sweet, sweet cheap labor, and the sweet, sweet labor regulations, which pretty much make operations cost next to nothing compared to what they cost in America to be able to manufacture over there. Then they ship it back into the United States, and now it's economically viable or economically competitive. The problem is that if you move manufacturing back to the United States, those American companies are not competitive anywhere in the world. They can't trade anything anywhere, because if you ship American-made goods at the price that they would be made at to a country like, say, the European Union as a whole, or the United Kingdom, or anywhere in the Middle East, or anywhere in East Asia, they're going to go, well, yeah, the product is a little bit better in quality, but why in the world would I buy it? It's almost 200% more expensive than this comparative alternative, which generally is cheaper, but also lower quality. And everyone's always going to buy the cheaper, low quality product. And so for that reason, they're not economically competitive. They lose out on trillions of dollars of revenue because they can't sell their products around the world. And then on top of that, American consumers aren't going to buy them because they are still compelled, like every consumer, according to polling and records and statistics that have been compiled, to buy the cheapest product. And so American products, that's generally why American products still don't even catch on that much in the United States. They're just not economically viable. They're not economically competitive enough. So with that in mind, that's why they really can't come back to America. That's why I'm not saying, oh, they should come back to America, because in realistic practice, it is next to impossible. And I know that a lot of people would like to make it possible, but dreaming something is different than it actually being real. And as far as the real ability for a company to return to the United States and be able to manufacture, it's incredibly low. I hope that answers that well. That's also why I'm trying to come up with alternatives rather than China and India. Vietnam is also an option, but I don't know how much of an option, because they're also a communist government and are a little bit more on a neutral stance with the United States. Somewhat friendly, but not to the point that they are considered an ally or anything along those lines. But manufacturing could move to Vietnam. That is another place where cheap labor and practically no labor regulations exist. But also Mexico is a highly likely candidate for that as well. So really any of those could work. But as far as China and India is going, it doesn't really look like that's the case. But with that,
But even moving the stuff, like for example, if you're suggesting to move it to Mexico, that is like years out. Like if, for example, let's say Apple. I think Apple's moved some of their manufacturing to India, I believe, from China. I think they might be doing like a hybrid. They're still doing some in China, still doing or starting to do some in India. If Apple wanted to move their production to Mexico, which I'm not sure if they'd ever even do that, that's like still years out. They got to build out the tooling, the manufacturing, the buildings, the whole infrastructure. And then they got to set up the distribution, actually get it out of there and sell them globally. So, I mean, that's a big situation right there. It reminds me of the TSMC situation with Taiwan. We're realizing that we've waited way too late to get TSMC out of Taiwan, which is literally an island right next to our biggest adversary, which is China. And they waited too late. We're kind of done the same thing as well with India. We're kind of like a couple of steps behind when it comes to moving any manufacturing out of these countries, which could turn pretty much adversarial at a moment's notice.
yeah, that's true. But generally, the major deal with it being in the United States, once again, is the complete lack of global competitiveness, and also due to the shipping chain, well, the shipping logistical infrastructure nowadays, you have to be an internationally competitive company to be able to sell your goods. Otherwise, you just pretty much perish. Because, and that's also something that a lot of people may not know, is that nowadays you can't really work on a national level economy. You pretty much have to work on a global level. And that's a huge, major issue, and that's also why you have to make sure that it's as economically competitive as possible. Otherwise, your company just really will not survive, because it's becoming too niche on a global market share or a global market scale. But with that, before we move on into the rest of our news tonight, because we still have lots of it left to cover, I do want to make sure that we get a couple of questions from the chat. Before we do, though, I do want to apologize so much once again for the chat going on and off. I've been seeing it the whole night, where the chat will stop for like 3 minutes and then start up again. Very sorry about everyone, I do not know what's going on. I heard some people saying that YouTube's getting hacked. I've also been hearing that it may be a solar flare. I'm also hearing that it's the return of the aliens. I've been hearing a million things in the chat as to why it's happening. Discord's having issues with lag here and there. It's a hell of a night, but we're still trying to push forward, and I do apologize everyone for all of the technical issues. But nevertheless, it is time for us to move on into the questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
And if it makes y'all feel any better, I've been communicating with YouTube the entire time, letting them know what's going on with it. So allegedly, they have techs on the issue. They're trying to figure out what is happening. Right now, I've not gotten an update about it. But apparently, obviously, we can see with our own eyes, the polls are breaking, the live chat's not working right, and it keeps speeding up, slowing down at random. So whatever's happening, they're having a bit of a glitch, which seems to be getting pretty common these days when it comes to glitches here on the platform. So hopefully they get that fixed. But moving on to our first Super Chat question, this one goes to a channel legend. It is BC Skyman. Once again, he returns again and throws in a $140 donation.
Dang.
A massive support. And thank you very much, BC, for that generosity and helping to keep the channel running. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you for the massive support, BC Skyman, and helping this channel to keep on running. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support is massively appreciative and helps us to keep this channel rolling day in and day out. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because you're an old guard in channel legend, and your support has been helping this channel to keep on running day in and day out. And if it wasn't for amazing old guards and channel legends like you who went out of their way to support this channel when you don't have to, we wouldn't have a show to run tonight. We wouldn't be able to run this show with all the technical issues that it's having, which makes streaming fun. It makes streaming great again, because we always have to figure out what the hell's going on, how to work around it, and then just try and press forward. And then you just don't really know if it's working or not, but you're still trying to talk, and you don't really know if people are hearing you or not. But we wouldn't be able to do any of that, and we wouldn't be able to be here to get out the news right now and put out short war videos earlier today and yesterday if it wasn't for folks like you. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, and our next support goes to another channel legend who is Old Warrior, and Old Warrior throws in a $50 donation as well, and thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, the U.S. Geological Survey says there's now 8 active volcanoes on Kamchatka Peninsula, and at least 3 have now been awakened by the quake. They are Zeltovsky, Apacha, Bizamani, Camp Bellinini, as well as Matnovsky, as well as Krashenovkov, I think, Shivalok, and Ayachinsky, and I found 7. And Old Warrior, I can't believe it. I got all 6 out of the 7 that you put in there actually pronounced somewhat properly, except for one of them. So you are correct, though. I did see the article today that apparently that massive magnitude 8 earthquake that happened right near Kamchatka, it literally awoke several active volcanoes in Russia, and it's causing them to start erupting, and it's causing a bit of an environmental crisis for Russia in the midst of everything else. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I'd have to thank you for the massive support, Old Warrior, and that is true. Actually, to give you all a little bonus clip, I wasn't going to show it tonight, but we actually did get to see a video film from a Russian aircraft of at least the Khrushchevskaya Sopka volcano erupting on the Kamchatka Peninsula. It was actually pretty wild. It was almost like a Hawaiian volcano eruption, like on the island of Oahu. Oahu! But we can see the volcanic eruption right there. Pretty crazy stuff, really.
Honestly, man, I'll say it's like Mother Nature is truly speaking to Putin at this point. There's so many natural disasters happening in Russia right now. It's almost hard to keep up with them.
I got to tell you, I mean, you know, the climate around there, it's certainly changing. No, we're not touching that. We're not touching that at all. But beyond that, we also have been able to hear, speaking of which, on that, Old Warrior, about the earthquakes in LA and also an earthquake in New York City. It was very close to it. Somewhat smaller. I think both of them were somewhat smaller. But that was still wild to hear. It's been a seismically active time this week. And it's just a really crazy kind of a thing to hear. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, Kamchatka Peninsula does have a load of active volcanoes on it. I mean, look at this. Each one of these little mountains right here is a volcano. Each one of them. And so quite a lot. Honestly, there's more significant mountains here than you would find on another part of the Pacific Rim, like in the state of Washington, which also has a lot of massive volcanoes as well, like Mount Rainier and Mount St. Helens, which actually did erupt violently. And then you also have Mount Adams just next door. It's really kind of like a crazy thing, to be entirely honest with y'all, seeing how much seismic activity has been going on in the world, and also volcanic activity as a result of it. But I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep running, Old Warrior, and sharing that with us, because it is a pretty wild thing to hear about. And of course, if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to give it a little bit of airtime on stream and get to talk about it a little bit. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I know at the moment, and I'm not really a volcanic expert or anything like that. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the final question of the segment, and then on into the rest of the news for the night. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so this one goes to another channel legend, our third and final one of the segment. This one goes to LC39A, who threw in a $110 donation, and a huge shout out to you, good sir, for that massive support yet again on almost on a streak of days 7 or 8, I think. So thank you very much, LC, for that support. He said, I am working.
Hey, and he's working it! He's working it! And I gotta thank you so much for the massive support, LC39. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be working either. You're supporting this channel while you're working to keep us working, and we're massively appreciative of that. I've got to tell you personally, I'm massively appreciative of it. Enforcer Matt's massively appreciative of it. Everyone's appreciative of it. And I gotta thank you massively. I hope that we're keeping you company while you're working and helping the work hours to pass by a little bit quicker, because it's always important, folks, to keep the work hours passing by fast, because otherwise they pass by slowly, and they can get down to a crawl sometimes, at least in terms of how long time feels. Like 1 minute can feel almost like an hour. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again for your support, LC39A. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well, and a huge thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it's time for us to move on out of this question segment. And oh, by the way, folks, while I had a little voice crack there, I got to thank the 14.3 thousand people who've shown up at the peak tonight to watch the live stream, and also the 100,000 people who have watched so far. We're honored to have y'all here, and we're about to be moving on to the second segment of this news right now, actually. But in the meantime, though, if y'all would like to, please make sure to subscribe. We'd love to have y'all here. If you enjoy our news so far, you'll probably enjoy it every night. So why don't you hit a little subscribe button, would you? So that way you could be around and listen to this news every night. I don't know. But anyways, moving on from that and on down into India, we have been able to hear that that someone got shot in the Poonch. Up in the Jammu and Kashmir region, we were able to hear that the ceasefire has been broken along the line of contact between the Pakistanis and the Indians, and we were able to get video footage of the firefight that were happening around Poonch. But it does appear that firing was spotted within the area, and everyone's saying that the other broke the ceasefire. Pakistan saying that India broke the ceasefire. India is saying that Pakistan broke it. Everyone's saying that the other broke it. We don't know who broke it, but here was a short clip that came out of the area of Poonch, showing everyone shooting at the Poonch. Here's the clip. I mean, you see some tracer fire returning from the other side. I have no clue why they're firing into the air like that. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but technically it's a ceasefire violation. So far, both sides, once again, are claiming that the other broke the ceasefire. Pakistan is saying that the Indians violated the ceasefire. India is saying that Pakistan violated the ceasefire, and now they're all shooting at each other. So we don't really know what's going on, at least within that area at the moment, or whether this is going to start breaking out into a larger border conflict or not, because it could really go either way. We do know that Pakistan is generally going to have to fight India at some point this year to reopen the dams in the Jammu and Kashmir region, but at the same time as well, we also know that the Indians are still spoiling to kick off Operation Sindoor 2.0, like they've stated in the past. So both of them are wanting to get back at it in terms of the fighting. It's just that we don't know who's going to end up firing first or going to war first. Is it going to be the Indians against the Pakistanis or the Pakistanis against the Indians? It's a little bit unclear at the moment. But in the meantime, a little bit further north in India, we also got to see that some pretty crazy cloudbursts created some flash flooding that literally wiped out villages. This is actually a video clip from today showing one of the massive floods hurtling down the mountain and literally wiping out an entire village, literally swept off of its foundations. And here's the clip. When you see folks running in the streets as the massive torrent is coming right for them, and the torrent starts wiping buildings away like they're nothing.
That is insane.
Sadly, those people all down there have perished in the flood. They either drowned or they were crushed. Unsure which one. But literally,
and what the hell they call right here, they call this a what?
They called it a cloudburst. So apparently it's like a whole it's literally like the best way I can explain it. It's like the clouds literally just transformed straight from their gaseous form of water to the solid form of water instantly. It falls to the ground and then just floods an area.
Jeez, I've never really seen anything quite like that. That's insane right there.
I,
That's like a flash flood on steroids.
I've never seen anything like this either. This is literally like a movie level tsunami. Like it literally just wiped out everything in its path. It was literally like a giant water-made bulldozer. And it's still coming down up there from the mountain. I mean, let's watch this again because watch. You'll see that all of the buildings it literally melts away from just the sheer weight and force of the water. I mean, there's people trying to run from it in their cars, in the street. No one escaped it. It was moving that quickly. It's moving at probably 60 to 80 miles an hour, so it's like an express train barreling down on you and literally wiping everything out as it goes. I mean, it's
It
so...
literally flattened it literally flattened those houses like it was IKEA flat pack or something like that. The way those things collapsed and literally just fell over and like folded on itself, that's a lot of damn power behind that water right there.
You know what's even crazier? Watch this part of the clip. Once it starts hitting the forest, you can literally see it taking down the trees, like literally just flinging them down to the ground and then just rolling right over them. Watch it. Look at that. The trees are literally getting flung down to the ground from the force of it.
I wonder if you're like caught in something like this right here. Do you get like I'm not trying to be morbid, of course, but do you get like knocked out from the force of the water? Like it seems like you just get knocked out like by this.
Generally, I would assume it's a pretty quick death because if the Jonestown flooding is anything to go by, most people in that flood generally either drowned really quickly or they were dashed onto something and died really quickly. And if y'all don't know what I'm talking about, let me take you all on up here. I've got to find where this is. So there's Altoona. So then we want to go down here to Johnstown. Johnstown actually was subjected to a very significant flood as this dam right here at the South Fork Hunting Club lake and fishing grounds actually ended up breaking in 1876, and the entire dam's contents, which went all the way up to about right here where this railroad main line is, broke out and immediately flooded in a giant torrent down the Little Conemaugh River, down to Johnstown, and ended up literally leveling the town. The disaster was horrendous. Let me actually show y'all some pictures of the Johnstown flooding to give y'all an idea, because this was actually the worst disaster that ever happened in American history in terms of the amount of people that died. And also, correction, folks, it was 1889, not 1879. But here is the aftermath of the Johnstown flood right there. That's what it looked like after the flood occurred. The flood came down with the same kind of force, speed, and torrent that y'all just saw in the last clip, and it was so strong that only, I believe, 3 of the town's buildings survived the flood, and I think there was about 1,500 buildings in the city at that time, and all of them were literally leveled or reduced to rubble, except for about 3, including one church. And the church only survived because it was a strong mason structure, but beyond that, 2,208 people died in this flood, meaning that more people died in this flood than Pearl Harbor or 9/11. It's generally unknown in modern history because it's been so long ago, but generally from what we know, at least from any survivor accounts of the few people that survived the flood that were in the town, most people would just get swept away, and they generally either just go under the water and they never be seen again, or they'd end up getting killed pretty quickly, usually outright, just from the force. Because you do have to remember the weight of the water and the speed at which it's moving is about 60 to 80 miles an hour. So with the kind of hydrodynamics involved in that, with that kind of speed, it is pretty much like a solid structure coming at you. So if it hits you, you pretty much die. It's like a freight train or a bus hitting you at full speed. So hopefully it was very quick for him, because that would be a horrendous thing to try and even survive through for as long as you can. But still, a pretty wild thing nonetheless, happening at the same time that the ceasefire was violated inside of India. Well, either by India or Pakistan, we're not really sure which. But beyond that, a lot of people are talking about who in the world broke the ceasefire today. India is denying that the ceasefire was broken. Video and picture evidence is showing that the ceasefire was broken. So was it broken? And also, as a bonus question, who broke it? But Matthew, what are you thinking about it? And what is everyone else thinking about it as well?
All right. So it looks like 49% of the audience said it likely was broken. And it's probably true that the ceasefire was broken by Pakistan and India simply denied it just to try to keep the peace. And 29% said we need more clarity. It's very confusing. And 9% said it was not broken and it's probably false news all the way around. Now, it was a little bit weird because at first, an Indian news outlet claimed that the ceasefire was broken by Pakistan. Then Pakistan didn't really comment on the situation, I don't think. And then the Indian army came out and said that the ceasefire was not broken. So everybody's on a different page with this. And I really refrained from coming to a judgment call in the short war video earlier today because it was not really clear exactly what happened. It seemed like some lies were being tossed around, and there was also some people trying to deny it, maybe. I honestly still don't know to this moment exactly what the case is. So I'm going to say we need more clarity. I'm with the 29%. It could be possible that maybe India is trying to keep the peace and they're trying to pretend like it wasn't violated, or maybe there was no violation in the first place. Right now, we just don't have enough information to know because literally everybody has a different story. The Indians have a different story, the Pakistanis have a different one, and then the media has their own version of the story. So obviously, someone's lying. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say it was definitely broken. We have video footage to confirm it. But as to who it broke, well, who broke it? Who knows? And also, does America really care? Well, given the current diplomatic situation with the Indians, I'd say not. But there's no reason for us to come to the aid of the Indians. They're going to get their ass beat a second time by the Pakistanis, which are supported by the Chinese, which are a BRICS member. So if India wants to go that route where they're going to get their ass beat a second time by the Pakistanis, which are funded and generally supported by the People's Republic of China at this point, well, have at it. I guess this is an internal BRICS affair, if we want to put it that way, and it's going to be the Thunderdome on the Indians again. But as far as the U.S. being there for them and present to try and mitigate the conflict or stop it from going down a horrendous route, I don't really think we should be there this time. I think that it's about time that the Republic of India learns that the United States has been treating them special because there's some sort of a mutual advantage between India and the United States to have a mutualist relationship. But this isn't all one way. India needs to learn at this point, with the answer that they gave through their foreign ministry today, that the good old Uncle Sam is not going to always be there for them, especially if they have that kind of response to us trying to stop the war in Ukraine. And if they want to continue down that path, they can get their ass beat by the Chinese pretty much, and we'll sit by and watch it happen. And then they can come complaining and whining to us about, oh, why in the world are we losing about a net $130 billion in trade every year now, and who knows how much extra additional will be lost to the European markets, which will be adhering to the sanctions. And, oh, boo-hoo-hoo, the Pakistanis beat my ass, because my Air Force sucks, and they get better training from the Chinese. What in the world are we going to do now? Where is America? I mean, they can figure it out then, because if they want the United States to be around to help them out, and also generally the Indians help us out as well with our positioning against the Chinese, well, they got to learn it's not a one-way street. Diplomacy is a two-way street, and alliances of any type are supposed to be mutual, where both sides get some sort of inherent benefit. If India doesn't know that, they're going to have to learn it the hard way, in my opinion, and it looks like they're generally moving down, learning it the hard way, at least in my opinion. But moving on from that and on out of that poll, we also have been able to see that the People's Republic of China has conducted another large naval drill within the South China, well, in the southern Strait of Taiwan, which we can see a small clip of right here. This appears to have been presented by video and pictures taken by the People's Liberation Army showing some of the military exercises that were conducted. And we can see a decent amount of China's supposed best weapons on display in this exercise.
Did they really have to shake the camera to let us know that the hit was that strong? Like, did they really have to do that?
Oh, they've got to. They can't add auto-stabilizing. That make it look too smooth.
Also, I don't like that like marine blue color they're painting all their like aircraft and like helicopters in. It kind of looks hideous.
Yeah, I honestly would say most of the Chinese military actually does look hideous. Like even the camouflage for their ground forces is really rough. It's like a digital, it's like digital vomit camo design. I don't like it. But beyond that, they were trying to show off their military prowess again. Is it impressive? Not really. But are they trying to intimidate the Taiwanese? Absolutely. But moving on from that and out of that clip and on into the rest of our news, we're now going to be moving on into the Middle East. We have been able to hear that as of today, the United States of America has had an MQ-4 Triton patrolling the coastline near to the area of Bandar Abbas, while at the same time, there's been unknown or explosions that have an unknown origin inside of Shiraz is really the best way to put it. But we can see the explosions right here. And the video clip just oddly cuts off, but still has 3 seconds left on it. And we can also see some drones over Shiraz as well, possibly the actual culprit or the reason for the explosions inside the city. But here's the clip.
اینم پهباد.
Oh, you see some of sort of a drone up there.
I thought the Iranians said they had control of the airspace again. I don't think they do.
I don't think they do, honestly. I don't know whose drone that is, but it's a mystery to be sure. Moving on from that, though, we also got to hear from the Iranian government that there was more smoke rising in Tehran, and not only was there smoke rising in the literal sense, but in the figure sense, they were also throwing out some smoke as well.
بلندی الان مشاهده میشه طرف غرب تهران. اینجا باید حوالی این دود آتش سوزی که شده انگار باید حوالی محله مثلا ابوذر صادقیه باشه. شاید حالا نزدیکای فرودگاه مهرآباد یه دود هم از این طرف بلند شده. این یه خورده دورتر، این دیگه واقعا احتمالاً از طرف فرودگاه بوده. یه مقدار مشکوکه، واقعا نمیدونم چیه این دو.
And that's seeing that clip right there. And we also got to hear at the same time that the Islamic Republic of Iran is now not going to be allowing any IAEA inspectors into Iran. Meanwhile, outside of the news inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran, we have been able to hear that the U.S. forces are quietly withdrawing from Syria, as we have been able to hear that U.S. troops have withdrawn from 3 key bases, including Congo gas fields and the Green Village, and the Pentagon has confirmed the withdrawal of U.S. forces within that area. In the meantime, we have also been able to hear that the Israelis were considering the annexation of the Gaza Strip yesterday, and that they've now officiated that, and they're going to be conducting a full-scale occupation or annexation of the Gaza Strip. They're claiming that they're going to be conquering the Gaza Strip, and we don't really know what that's going to entail. It could entail a complete annexation or some sort of a long-term occupation of the entire strip. We have also been able to hear that apparently Netanyahu's on the phone with Putin, calling him on the cell phone, trying to mitigate the tensions between the United States and the Russians, although I don't really know what the hell he could do, because it's not really like Israel has a good position with the Russians. The Russians kind of hate the Israelis, so I don't really know what his phone call is going to do, but apparently he's making it, so we have that to work with.
Honestly, at this point, the fact that Netanyahu can get on the cell phone with Putin, but yet the U.S. really can't, I feel like the U.S. president might be kind of like along this lines, like, you used to call me on the cell phone. Something of that nature.
Man, honestly, I think so. But also at the same time, it's like, man, the Russians hate Israel. Like they hate him in particular, like Netanyahu. It's like just recently they were saying that they were going to get militarily involved against the Israelis if they keep bombing the Syrians or keep bombing anyone in Lebanon. They were giving a pantsir not that long ago, or at least planned to Hezbollah. So it's like, are they really so, like, is Netanyahu really the guy who should be calling up the Russians? That's like, man, I hate the president of the United States. I wonder who else that I hate so much and so greatly would call me up on the phone at this time. Ring, ring. Hold up, everyone. Let me get that. Здравствуйте. Netanyahu? Like, it's like, bro, like, how, like, I don't even know.
It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird, isn't it? Because Netanyahu like seems to call up everybody on the phone, even though if he's like technically not friends with them or not, Netanyahu's got a direct line to pretty much everybody. So I don't even really understand. Also, here's my thing. The U.S. is perfectly capable of dealing with Russia on our own. Why is Israel stepping into the middle of it like they're some like major powerhouse or something? Like they're obviously a regional power, a very strong regional power, but they're not a superpower that projects globally. That's not really the case. But yet they're kind of acting like that. I'm like, yeah, you know, it's a good attempt, but I don't really understand the point behind it, because it's not like Netanyahu's going to be able to speak sense to Putin. Like Putin's obviously in a situation that he can't even back out of if he wanted to. So I don't really understand it.
I used to call them on the cell phone. I like Burger King. But anyways, moving on from that, it makes no sense. I'm not even going to try and figure it out, because at this point, stuff happens and it makes no sense all that much, really. But beyond that, it appears that the world superpower, the Israelis, are going to be talking to Putin and calming the whole thing down. So that makes me feel a lot better. And we all know that Netanyahu has great relations with the Russians. It's not like the Russians were threatening to bomb the Israelis because the Israelis attacked Iran. It's not like that happened like a couple of months ago. Y'all were just imagining that. It's a matter of fact, Israel's friends with the world. You know, everyone knows that one. But anyways, Beyond that, however, we do understand that an Iranian missile site in Shiraz did explode today in southern Iran, and drones were spotted in the area, which is making the whole thing a little sus. And Mandy, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So it looks like, of course, we did see on the video that a very large ballistic missile site in Iran just randomly exploded in spectacular fashion. And drones were also spotted in the area sort of at the same time. So I guess like cause, effect, correlation, maybe, somewhat, not sure. But what are your thoughts in the audience? 55% said it's likely an Israeli drone attack that caused the explosion, while 34% said it was likely a Mossad sabotage attack on the ground. And 3% said it seems like it was unrelated to Israel whatsoever. And considering the fact that Iran has admitted that Mossad agents are on the ground in Iran, they can't track them, they don't know where they are, it's very likely it probably was a sabotage attack by some Israeli intelligence agency, most likely Mossad. I would tend to believe it probably was not an Israeli drone attack because we did not get footage of one of these drones actually impacting on the missile site, which it seems like we'd have probably gotten that because, of course, they were filming the drones from the sky, but we didn't see that on camera. So I would tend to lean toward the 33%. Likely a ground attack, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have to say that I'd actually be with this 56%. It likely was probably an Israeli drone attack. Drones really don't pop up a lot, at least from what we've seen in picture and video evidence. So I generally have to go with a majority that because of the presence of the drones, it may have been some sort of a Israeli drone attack of some sort, although it's still a little unclear. But moving on from that and into the rest of the news that we have tonight, because we still have a million yards of news left to go, we were able to hear that the British have now put out a new intelligence report on the war in Ukraine, and they are stating that the Russians have taken over 1 million casualties since 2022, and 260,000 casualties just in this year alone, over about the half of it since lasted. They also added in some additional parts of the reports, but we generally cover that night to night. Moving on from that, though, and on into Romania, we also got to see that the Russians did end up hitting some sort of an ammunition facility near to the Danube River. This was actually filmed from the Romanian side of the river, and we can see that in the clip right here.
Он так горит сейчас. Со стороны Румынии видно, как белый день.
That thing is cooking.
Вон на пароме все стоят.
Everyone's filming it.
What's the ticket booth for? Like to watch the fire, or is that for something else?
I think the ticket booth is for something else, but I guess for this point, it's for the fire.
Все горит.
They ought to jump out and start selling tickets for this. And like, also, why is there a French flag on that?
I don't know. Oh, and we hear the air defense opening up now.
You can pay 5 cents to shoot the air defense.
Oh, there was a Russian drone up there. I actually just saw it, like, through the watermark a little bit. You know, that's crazy. Like, seeing something through a watermark, that's nuts. It's right there. Right there. You can see it. It's going right to left. See? There it goes. But that was the drone. We see that fire still burning across the river. A little bit crazy. You can watch a whole war going on from Romania.
Минут 15 горит.
Hopefully it doesn't cross the river.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. But moving on from that, we were able to see the Ukrainians hit the Russians about tenfold after that. We were able to see first the Ukrainians attacked a railway station within the Volgograd region, which was pretty heated.
А вот теперь где-то истребитель летит, только где, блядь?
Hey guys, have y'all ever heard a good imitation of a seagull before? No?
Где-то.
Well, do you wanna? Well, here it comes.
Oh.
Oh, that's a seagull right there for sure. The camera lady wasn't wounded or injured in any of that. It's just apparently watching a drone fly in was a little bit too much. The other Russians have had lesser reactions to that similar thing. But nevertheless, we also were able to see that near to the area of the town of Tetsinskaya, there was also another attack that ended up turning a rail yard and railway station into what appears to be hell on earth. We can see that in this clip right here. This guy also appears to be running from Slender Man in the meantime.
Yeah, really. It's like he's out of breath. He's like, must be Mr. Lunchtime behind the camera. But
Dude.
also, you know, based on all these train cars and tankers sitting here in this like train station depot type deal here, I wonder what the odds that something extremely toxic is burning in this train yard, because it seems like it could be that they've caught something on fire, which is flammable and probably toxic.
Probably. Dude, this is the average Russian arsonist when they see a fire in the distance like a moth to a flame.
Why is he running towards it? I mean, that's a good question. I mean, in every single one of these videos, the Russian is always running toward the fire. It's like, shouldn't you like run away from the fire? It's like, what the hell?
Are you trying to apply a logic to the Russians? Dude, that's ridiculous. Like, honestly.
That's survival instinct. That doesn't require like some LSAT level knowledge right there. That's just like, you see fire, it's hot, you run away. It's like this is the complete opposite of survival instinct.
Man, survival instinct, non-existent. Also, let me go find where this was in the... Actually, sorry, correction, everyone. This is in the Rostov region. I said the Volgograd region a second ago. Whoopsies. But here is the rail yard. So this guy is somewhere down here or over here, and he's running towards the fire because that's in the town of Tatsinskaya, which is right here on the screen. So a little bit odd with that, but, he's got his priorities, man. He's got his priorities. He wants to see a fire, and nothing's going to stop him, and he's going to run until he collapses. We also got to see an air defense munitions explosion in Rostov as well earlier today, where it appears that some sort of an ammunition facility was hit and also blew up. We could tell by the thick white smoke that billowed out from the original primary explosion. Moving on from all those air attacks that the Ukrainians just landed inside of the Russian Federation, we also heard that they hit a pretty big one in Saki. Now, Saki is not the Japanese rice wine. This is an airfield inside of Crimea, which you can see right about here. This is the Saki Air Base, and the Ukrainians were able to hit a drone attack within this area, and according to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, they were able to hit and damage 2 Su-30s and 3 Su-24s, totaling around $120 million worth of losses for the Russian Air Force in a singular attack. Not that bad, actually. But moving on out of that, and on up into the Ukraine war itself, we have also been able to see some interesting location unknowns, including some pictures of the 12th Azov in training. These pics go hard. These were actually really good. And I was like, dang, these pics go hard. But, nevertheless, that's really all there is to them. Moving on from that, though, and on to the Russian casualty report, we also got to see the casualty report for the past 24 hours, and it was actually pretty decent. According to Miss Decent, keeper of the records, first time in 2 weeks, troop losses are over 1,100, and AFVs are in the double digits. Other categories are at or above 7-day averages, meaning that today is a good day. We have been able to hear that 1,120 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 12 APCs, 93 supply trucks, 2 main battle tanks, 28 artillery pieces, 169 drones, and 2 cruise missiles. In general, it was a very good day, and great to see the Ukrainian armed forces are continuing to inflict those kinds of casualties. Meanwhile, within the northern area of the front line, we were able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces were able to pull off a once-in-a-lifetime kind of an airstrike. Ukrainian air forces were able to drop a airstrike onto the 74th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade's temporary barracks made somewhere around the Svitove area, and in the midst of this airstrike, they ended up knocking out dozens of Russian service members, killing them outright. We don't know how many were wounded, but the debris and damage is showing us that it was a pretty gruesome sight, at least when it originally happened. And it does appear that a decent amount of the 74th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade's manpower has been lost in the midst of that strike. But moving even further on down the front, as we weren't really able to hear a lot of news out of Seversk, we were able to hear some news going on the southern flank of the Konstantinivka front, where we were able to see Ukrainian drones of the 61st Mechanized Brigade dropping drone bombs onto the Russians. And we see them starting off right here, slamming it right on down into the Russians in the house below. And we see him doing it a second time, because it's even funnier the second time. We can see him slamming it down right there as well.
I just got to point out that badge up there in the top left corner, that snake going, wow, and it's like lurching back because it's scared, it's shocked by whatever it just saw. That was me when the YouTube chat started screwing around with us tonight, and also the poll's not working either. I went, wow.
Dude, that snake just saw Putin. Oh, no, dude, just saw Kadyrov on that video where he's riding that bike like an idiot, and it went, wow. It's absolutely terrifying. But moving on from that clip and on into our next one on the Konstantinivka front, we also got to see the 82nd Air Assault Brigade targeting and hitting some Russian forces within the area as well. Take a look. This isn't the old 82nd Brigade of the U.S. Army, but it is the 82nd Brigade of the Ukrainian Army. And they were hitting them good. We see them lining up all the Russians.
What was the metric again for the losses? I think it was the last report from the United States was 14-1. That was the last casualty report.
Yeah, something like that.
Insane, honestly. When you watch all these videos with that in context, that's just insane.
Yeah, so when you all watch these clips, remember, every single time you think that you've counted about 14 Russians that may or may not have been taken out, that finally, after those 14, one Ukrainian soldier may have been killed. Possibly. So it's an incredibly good running odds at the moment that the Ukrainians have on the defensive battle, because Usually, you're looking to lose 1 defender for every 3 attackers lost. That's actually considered a pretty decent metric. 14 to 1, however, is just insanely in odds of the Ukrainians, pretty much every single level. But moving on from that and on into Pokrovsk, we also got to see Ukrainian fiber optic drones hitting the Russians as well. This was in the 152nd Jaeger Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Jaeger units, by the way, are not about Jägermeister. They're actually about mountains, because the word Jaeger generally means in German something along the lines of a mountain infantry.
I thought it meant alcohol,
Actually, hang on. Let
like
me think.
Jägermeister.
Wait, no. I'm sorry. Jaeger, I believe, is light infantry. Let me go check that really quickly because I swear. Hold up.
Jaeger is hunter, like huntsman.
Jaeger unit. Oh, why does it say unit tag? I was just wondering. It's light infantry. It is light infantry. Whoopsie daisy, everyone. Because actually, let's see. I think mountain infantry in German would be something like Alpenjägers or something like that. It's also mountain light infantry or something along those lines. But moving on from that and on to our next.
Man, Jaeger means hunter. It means huntsman in German.
I pulled up the unit, however, and a Jaeger unit is generally light infantry. So I think that's the military term for it, but Jaeger also does mean hunter. But in military terms, Jaeger means light infantry. But moving on from that, we can also see them hitting some ATVs. We see them slamming them. We see him hitting them here. We see them continuing to hit the Russian forces. And this is, by the way, is Madyar's Birds unit that is conducting this action right here. We see them continuing to hit the Russians, and we can see one of their vehicles finally cooking off. And it's toasting quite nicely. And we see them continuing to hit the Russian forces. Look at them go. And oh, that one's toasting quite nicely, actually. And look at them burning down there quite nicely. It's like a nice little rust. Well, that's the end of the clip right there. And before we move on, I do see a lot of people saying that Jaeger does mean hunter. It does, but in military terms, it is a light infantry unit. Now let me go make sure that I get this one, Alpenjäger. And let me go get this for y'all really quickly. This is mountain infantry, Alpenjägers, in German at least. So Jaeger units are light infantry, and then Alpenjäger are mountain light infantry, specialized for mountain warfare. For some reason, I thought that the Jaegers, for a minute, were Ukraine's mountain infantry. Technically, they're not. Technically, the mountain infantry of Ukraine are actually just called mountain infantry. But I wanted to make sure to clarify that really quickly, just in case some people are like, man, the enforcer is stupid. No, not really. This is more so an antiquated term, though, and generally you will see it used in a lot of European armed forces, especially those east of Germany. Germany uses the term, but also a lot of countries east of Germany also use the term, because I believe there are also Polish Jaegers that exist as well. And let me go show those to y'all really quickly. Let's see, Polish Jaeger infantry. Let me make sure to check this really quick. And yeah, here we are, actually. Let's see here. Actually, hold up. No, this is not the unit that I was looking for. I'll have to try and I'll have to try and look for them a little bit more. But nevertheless, Jaegers are light infantry, and then Alpenjäger is mountain infantry or mountain light infantry, and then Jägermeister is this really cool kind of infantry that gets you all messed up. But anyways, moving on from that and on out of the area, it is time for us to move on out of the Pokrovsk front and down towards Zaporizhia, where we were able to see Russian forces getting hit by a MiG-29 airstrike, which we can see in this clip right here.
Also, by the way, for the people asking, Jägermeister, the alcohol, I think it literally means, translating to German, it's like hunter master or master hunter if you reverse it. And also, Tino pointed out there's a literal deer on the bottle. I'm not a drinker, so I don't really know, but I've seen a picture of Jägermeister, and I think there is like some like deer or like something on the bottle. So yeah, that's probably why.
Man, the hunt master is out there getting absolutely sideways, apparently.
You got to stay, nice and hydrated on your hunt.
Oh yeah, that hunt master. I don't really think he's a master of hunting. I think at that point the guy is so absolutely plastered. He's probably like Dick Cheney at that point. He just sees some guy and yells "deer," bam, and like it fires him. Who knows, But anyways, we also got to see another clip where some artillery counter battery was conducted against the Russian D-30. Take a look at this. Now, folks, having a Jägermeister drink here and there might not be too bad, but if you hear that your Jägermeister is Dick Cheney, you might want to, keep one eye open at all times and keep one eye behind you.
Also, some people are saying it's to stay warm. I've heard that. Now, like I said, I'm not a drinker, but I've heard people that drink like bourbon or whiskey or something. They say it it makes you warm or makes you at least feel warm or something. I wouldn't know, but maybe someone in the chat is a drinker. They could range anywhere from like a light drinker to an alcoholic. Could let us know. That'd be curious to know.
Actually, it's true. It doesn't make you warm, though. But when you drink hard liquors like that, there's actually a bit of a scientific fact to it. It makes your blood vessels contract to be slightly smaller, which makes you feel that you're warmer. You're not actually warmer as a result of drinking it, but you do feel warmer.
Interesting. I'm fascinating. I personally would never drink a whiskey straight or anything like that. Personally, just me. Seems like it's pretty hard on the liver, but that would be interesting at least to see what they were talking about.
Oh yeah, everyone's saying the fact in the chat. They're like, it dilates the blood vessels, and it does, and so it makes you feel a little bit warmer, but you're not actually warm. You're still cold, and that's something actually that some people. Well, actually, it has helped out at one time because this is actually an interesting true story. One of the chefs on board the Titanic realized that the Titanic was sinking, so this guy just had a good idea, I guess, and he just started popping open every expensive wine he could and just downing it, or downing any expensive drinks that were held in the pantry of the kitchen. And so he didn't get on a lifeboat, but because he was so drunk by the time he got into the frigid waters, he actually survived long enough that someone was able to pick him up. We're not entirely, and also, by the way, he actually was in the debris field of the wreck, so the lifeboats had to return to get him, and he was one of the few people to survive long enough to be able to get in a lifeboat at that point in the debris field, if I remember the story correctly. So the guy was actually a little bit lucky that he was absolutely blitzed by the time he got in the water, because if he wasn't, he probably would have gone the way of everyone else and just died.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, a little bit of a crazy story. But beyond that crazy story, we have something else crazy to show all of y'all. The speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1259 of the war in Ukraine. So without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Шановні українці, сьогодні весь день в Лозовій на Харківщині після ударів російських шахедів працювали наші рятувальники, наші ремонтники. Більш ніж 2 десятка шахедів цілеспрямовано по цивільній інфраструктурі. Це специфічна тактика терору, російського терору. Вони спрямовують кілька десятків шахедів на одне місто, на одну нашу громаду. В Лозовій 2 людини загинули. Мої співчуття рідним та близьким. Ще 13 людей постраждали, серед них 2 дитини. Усім надається необхідна допомога. Була також пошкоджена залізнична інфраструктура. Українські залізничники, справжні герої, вже відновили рух через Лозову. Важливо, що завжди наші люди відновлюють основу для життя. Це знають в світі і дуже добре слова говорять про українців і допомагають нашій державі завдяки тому, що стільки всього українці наші роблять для захисту життя. Сьогодні говорив з президентом Трампом. Найголовніше про закінчення війни. Він дуже добре поінформований. Він знає про російські удари, знає про ситуацію на фронті, про те, що росіяни зараз намагаються зробити удари більш інтенсивними. Ми в Україні повністю підтримуємо американську пропозицію негайного припинення вогню. Ми вже багато різних форматів пробували, як можна припинити вогонь, як можна припинити вбивство. Ми говорили та пропонували Росії тишу в небі, відсутність таких ударів, ракети, дронів і загалом по цивільній інфраструктурі і конкретно відсутність ударів по енергетиці. Все це порушувалось росіянам, причому дуже цинічно. Навіть коли вони не били шахедами, вони били просто по енергетичному обладнанню, по трансформаторах. І жодного дня вони не припиняли терор проти цивільних. Жодного дня вони не давали реальної повної тиші на фронті. І першою причиною війни є лише бажання росіян контролювати життя сусідів, підкорювати сусідів, вбивати сусідів. Якби не це, війни би не було. Дуже важливо, що в Москві почали зважати на тиск світу, на тиск Сполучених Штатів Америки, на загрозу більш жорстких санкцій за війну. І дійсно один з ключових санкційних треків проти російської нафти, щоб Росія пішла на мир. У неї мають закінчитись гроші на війну. Працюємо заради цього, і я вдячний усім в світі, хто підтримує. Ми обговорили сьогодні з президентом Сполучених Штатів Америки наші двосторонні відносини. Ми пропонуємо хорошу угоду щодо дронів. Ми будемо з нашою командою і командою Сполучених Штатів працювати над деталями угоди. Я хочу подякувати також Америці, партнерам в Європі, в НАТО за можливість нового постачання зброї в межах спеціальної ініціативи. Напередодні було рішення Нідерландів про 500 мільйонів євро. Сьогодні є рішення Швеції, Норвегії та Данії на загальну суму в 500 мільйонів доларів. Кошти на закупівлю американської зброї, зокрема ракет для патріотів. Дякую. Особливо також хочу відзначити зусилля Марка Рютте, щоб це запрацювало. Сьогодні, до речі, з Марком ми говорили, я подякував йому особисто. Говорили також сьогодні з прем'єр-міністром Хорватії, привітав його з Днем Перемоги. Це День хорватських захисників незалежності. Україна вдячна Хорватії за дуже принципову підтримку нашої боротьби за нашу незалежність. Ми обговорили з ним ситуацію на фронті, наші дипломатичні можливості. Дякую. Дякую, Хорватія, за приєднання до цього інструменту Safe Security Action for Europe. Це така спеціальна програма в Євросоюзі, яка акумулює кошти на зброю. Зокрема, наша держава отримає оборонну підтримку в рамках цієї програми. 18 країн-учасниць. Ми говоримо з усіма. Україна теж повноправно готова брати участь в програмі, тим більше, що наша зброя є однією з найбільш ефективних. Говорив сьогодні також з прем'єр-міністром Греції. Подякував за підтримку. Ми обговорили, що можна зробити разом для захисту життів, для зміцнення дипломатії. Я вдячний Греції та пану прем'єр-міністру за готовність брати участь у відбудові в Одесі та у розбудові наших транспортних коридорів не тільки в Україні, а загалом в нашій частині Європи. І ще кілька важливих речей. Провів ставку. Саме про те все, що мені вчора говорили наші військові на Харківщині. Дуже конкретна розмова була з ними. Всі питання сьогодні я поставив військовому командуванню, Генеральному штабу, міністру оборони України. Ми точно збільшимо фінанси для бригад на пряму закупівлю дронів. На понеділок має бути чіткий порядок дій, як бригади зможуть також напряму купувати пікапи, і саме такі, які потрібні бригадам. буде розширення контракту 18-24. Зараз ми пропрацьовуємо деталі. Також, до речі, реалізувати те, про що ми говорили з нашими воїнами, питання підготовки, питання комунікації всередині армії між вищим командуванням і бригадами. Ми домовились, що буде також регулярна комунікація, в тому числі з батальйонами. Спробуємо зробити це так, щоб дійсно знати, які є потреби. Павло Паліса займається цим разом з Генштабом та командувачами. Ще одна принципова річ, про яку ми говорили, це нагороди. На жаль, дуже часто так буває, що нагороди чекають місяцями. Вже указ я підписав, вже формальності ми пройшли, а вручення немає. Надто багато бюрократії і на всіх, абсолютно на всіх етапах від подання до вручення. Ми будемо скорочувати цей шлях. І хочу також зараз відзначити глобальну нашу коаліцію за повернення українських дітей, які були викрадені Росією, та роботу нашої української ініціативи Bring Kids Back UA. Сьогодні є заява країн коаліції, а це 38 країн. Рада Європи, Європейський Союз, абсолютно чітка підтримка, абсолютно принципова вимога миру та відновлення справедливості. Всі українські діти, також всі українські наші полонені, військові та цивільні мають бути повернуті додому в Україну. І все інше, що треба для миру, починаючи з припинення вбивств. Треба це робити. Саме Росії треба це робити. Росія повинна припинити цю війну, яку сама вона почала, яку вона затягує. Україна обов'язково захистить свою незалежність. Слава Україні!
Ram Slava.
Slava.
And with that, really quickly, folks, give me just a minute so that we can try and fix something on Discord, because it seems that we're running into a small issue here, and hopefully that'll be fixing it. But with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1259 of the news from around the world. And it's time for us to move on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, what a fun segment this is. We get to talk about literally anything and everything that y'all want to talk about. And of course, we'll be getting the super chats first, but then we'll be getting the live chat second. And hopefully that little Discord thing fixed the problem. And so with that, Matthew, I understand that we actually have one last poll here to ask all the folks in the audience. What are people thinking about it, Matthew, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so we did get some more delusion today from Vladimir Putin, and today Putin stated that he believes the Ukrainian front lines will fall in just 2 to 3 more months. And what do you think? 68% said it sounds delusional, Putin is a clown. 15% said sounds plausible, it's very concerning, and 10% said I need some more details first. Now, if you recall properly, at the very beginning of the war, Putin said, we'll have it in 3 days. The Russians said that as well. Also, the experts said that too. It turned out to be so false, it turned into 3+ years. So now Putin is saying just 2 or 3 more months and they'll have it under control. Sounds like delusional cope, sounds insanely crazy. And I believe Putin is either truly believing that because he's either gone berserk or psychotic or something, or they're just saying that just to cope, one or the other. I'm not really sure, but it's obviously not reality. So I'm with the 68%. It's delusional. Putin is clown, as they say. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm with the 68% as well. That's absolutely clown-like mentality. Nothing showing that the Ukrainian front lines are even close to collapsing at this point. And he also said this last year that the Ukrainian front lines wouldn't last that much longer. This is like the gambler that sits there and says, oh, I haven't won the big jackpot yet, but give it 2 more runs of the slot machine, I'll win a jackpot. That's the very same kind of logic that Putin has at this point, and it's just to try and keep justifying a continuation of the war because it's only just 2 to 3 more months, and then it ends up being another year or another 2 years or another 10 or maybe another 50, something along those lines. So I'd have to be with a large majority. It's absolutely delusional thinking from Putin. But with that, it is time for us to get on into the questions themselves. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so it is now time to cool off a bit. Tonight's been a crazy night with the news and also with all the glitches that have been happening tonight. Literally, every single system we have that we run the stream on is glitched tonight. Discord's glitching, YouTube's glitching, everything. So it's been a trip tonight, I will admit. But it's now time to talk to y'all and the audience, which is the best time of the stream, in my personal opinion, that we finally get to address all the questions. So jumping right into our super chats first, our first one here goes to Detroit Adam, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Detroit Adam, for that generous support and helping to keep the channel running. He said, "Hello, Enforcers. It's great to be back and with a new daughter." And also, congratulations, Adam, by the way.
Hey.
We said LSA Private First Class, Lainey Danger. Yeah, that's right. Danger is her middle name, and I finally got my way with that. And all are well and healthy, proud LSA members, and keep up the great work and LSA.
Hey, and a big congratulations to you, Detroit Adam, for getting a daughter. That's a huge thing. Congratulations to you, and that's great to hear. I hope that you are a great father, and that you also have a great upbringing for your daughter, the future of the country for the large part. And I got to say, it's great to have you back, Detroit Adam. I got to thank you massively for being here tonight, and also sharing the huge news with all of us here in the LSA. And also, I got to say that Danger being the middle name, that's a pretty interesting middle name. I haven't heard that one in a while. Pretty bold, pretty daring, I'd say, but still a very interesting one, and probably a good one nonetheless. But it's still got to say a big thanks to you so much once again for being one of the members of the Lee Spring Army. Has been for an incredibly long time. You've been an old guard and been around through thick and thin, through a lot on this channel. And I gotta say thank you so much for supporting this channel and helping us to keep up the great work, and also sharing that news with us that we have a new member of the LSA. So, of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. A huge thanks to you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Yo-Yo the Great, who puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Yo-Yo, as well, for that generous support. They said a little something for coffee due to inflation, high as hell, and I agree with that. Good point. They said, much rather watch the news here. And one question, forgive me if I missed it, but Poland has Aegis ashore, and wouldn't that be helpful in defense of Russia? And keep up the good work, guys.
And I thank you for so much for the support, Yo-Yo the Great. And that's actually a great question that you have about the Aegis Ashore system. They actually do have an Aegis Ashore system, or at least we do, but it's inside of Poland. And this is the system right here. Are they deliberately blurring this out now? Hold on, let me refresh this. It looks like Google may have done, actually Google has done a little OPSEC update. They've blurred out the whole Aegis Ashore system now. Used to not be, but it's stationed right outside of Slupsk on this roadway right here. I cannot believe that, folks, because for the longest time, it's never been blurred out, and now it's blurred out. Let's see here. I think you can actually see the road leading to it. So let me see if I can show you all that. There we go. There's the road leading down to it. You can actually see the checkpoint right there. But that is the Aegis Ashore system back here. It's one of these little blobs right here. But beyond that, the Aegis Ashore is pretty much a SM-3 vertical launch system that is based on land. And it can help in the defense against a Russian attack in Eastern Europe. It could shoot down short and intermediate range ballistic missiles, because that's generally what the system is designed to do. So it actually could help out in the defense. You're absolutely correct with that. As far as that, thank you so much for the support to the coffee fund. And inflation is getting on up there a little bit these days. It's starting to be felt by a lot of people, but still, I thank you massively for that, because it's going to be helping us to get a good bit of coffee. So, of course, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I also hope that does address your question incredibly well. And we actually have a couple of Aegis Ashore systems throughout Europe. I think we have two of them, one in Romania and one in Poland. But the one in Poland is near Slupsk, just to let all of y'all know in case y'all didn't know where it was. But with that, a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And thank you so much for supporting this channel. And I hope I had a pretty good answer to your question. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so with that, moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Robert Hendrickson, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you, Robert, as well, for that support and also helping to keep the channel running. And he said, I appreciate you guys pointing out what legacy media choose to ignore, and an informed citizenry is vital to a republic. And you guys are keeping us informed in a way that is increasingly crucial in the blizzard of misinformation and fake news we face.
And I've got to say a huge thanks to you for the support, Robert Hendrickson, and helping this channel to keep on running. I got to say, that's a really high praise of you right there, because I always like to think that this channel is working in the best interest of the public as much as we possibly can to make sure that we are getting all of the major news out there that we can, as unbiased as it can be, whether it's good, whether it's bad. Usually the news used to be good, but nowadays it's started to get a little bit more concerning, I'll be entirely honest. Like, when I look at my titles on these thumbnails and streams these days, they're getting crazy, and I've got to be honest with y'all. on a level of what's in the thumbnails and the titles, I actually don't like them. And that sounds a little bit weird because I'm actually the one making the thumbnails and the titles. But I don't like them because the actual situation that's starting to evolve overseas is not positive. It's actually becoming concerning to a lot of people. And I've always told you all here on the channel that as far as it's within my power, I'll always make sure that I'm never an alarmist channel saying the nuclear bombers are flying or that World War III is coming. I would never do that if I didn't have to. And nowadays, it's becoming such a concerning inevitability, even at this point, that the titles and the thumbnails are starting to have to go along those lines. And that's something that generally, folks, I actually don't really like too much because I know that a lot of y'all are, of course, going to be concerned about it. Any reasonable person would be concerned about the kinds of thumbnails and titles that are coming out these days about what's going on. But it's unfortunately the reality of what we're seeing overseas. I hope, though, I really do hope that while we're having to report the news as accurate as we can be and the situation isn't really coalescing to be the greatest, I would also have to say that on an equal footing, I would have to say that it's still good to know that people are being informed through the channel, although it is, of course, a fairly concerning foreign policy situation at this point. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. I also thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would never be able to make this thing possible. We wouldn't be able to keep it running, and I've got to say that it's an amazing thing to know that folks like you really enjoy this channel and enjoy the way that we cover this news, and the fact that we also want to make sure that the nation at large is as well informed as it can be, because most mainstream news does not cover stuff like this. I think right now, let's see. If I had to like telepathically guess what CNN and Fox are talking about, which are two of the largest names in news right now, Fox News is probably talking about how the president is the greatest person on the planet, probably even better than God, and then CNN is also saying that he's quite literally the devil incarnate. And then there's nothing else talked about beyond that of substance about anything going on in the country or anything going on overseas. Because I'll let y'all know something, folks. I actually have been trying to deal with something in the background here, and it's actually been aggravating me a good bit. And I feel like these are some of the topics that should be addressed on the news, at least here in the country. I went to go get a star ID recently, and I was told that they're not taking walk-ins, at least here in the state of Alabama. They're not taking walk-ins, and you have to schedule an appointment. And if you schedule an appointment, they're scheduled as far out as late November right now because that's how big the queue is. I did not know that, like at all. No one has reported on that situation in America. It's an absolute disaster right now. And I have to say really quickly, the only reason I'm talking about this is because we all know anything about how the Star ID came to be. It's been something that's been battled in the courts ever since 9/11, for large part, because it was brought forward, I believe, Matthew, if I'm not mistaken, in the Patriot Act, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. But it's been in a battle in the courts for the longest time, and it finally was allowed to go ahead, I think, in 2024, early 2024, and it was finally implemented in 2025, and it's going absolutely abysmally. Like, you can't get a star ID right now. And I see some people saying real ID. Matthew, is it called a real ID? Because I've always called it the star ID.
So technically, by legislation, it's called the Real ID system, but in Alabama, it's called the Star ID. It's unique to each state because each state has to implement their own version of Real ID. So it's a little bit different everywhere. But in Alabama, it's called a Star ID, and they put like a gold star on your license. But yeah, they've been kicking the can down the road on the Real ID Act for quite some time. They were supposed to implement it like I think years and years ago. But the reason why they kept kicking it down the road is because there was so much public backlash to it that they weren't quite ready to pull the trigger on it yet. But for whatever reason, they decided to actually implement it here recently. So I didn't see too much public backlash this time on it. Of course, there was a group of people that were very vocal about it, but it seemed like people got worn down on it, and the government figured, well, it's time to just go for it since everybody's sort of gone mum generally on it, so they went for it.
Also, really quickly, folks, I've been seeing, and I'll explain this really quickly then, because I thought that this was a federal sort of a requirement. So in Alabama, apparently, especially, we call it a star ID by legislation. You can see it right here, star ID in Alabama, star ID, it goes into effect in Alabama. star ID. Apparently, everywhere else in the country, it's being called a real ID in most states. But here in Alabama, it's not as easy as renewing your license. And I see a lot of people saying, oh, it's that easy. It's not that easy in Alabama. If you want to renew your license, you are still a subclass citizen by Alabama definition, and you don't get the star. So you have to go and make a special appointment here in the state of Alabama to go to the, I think it's the licensing office, completely separate, actually, mind you all, from the driver's license office, at least from what I saw when I went down there. And you have to sit there and get an appointment and then wait, and then go into the office when your appointment finally comes around, which is about 3 or 4 months from now. And then they get you the new license within an hour. But you can't, if you want to renew your license, at least here in Alabama, when you go to renew it, it doesn't turn into a star ID. And you have to also have a whole bunch of stuff with you to prove that you're an actual citizen. It's a list of things longer, I found out, than getting a U.S. passport, which is absolutely insane. Like, I actually found that out as well, Matthew. You only need your driver's license, not a star ID, just a normal driver's license and a birth certificate to get a passport. To get a star ID here in Alabama, you have to have about 5 different documents proving where you live, proving that you were born in America and you're a citizen of the United States, because it's naturalized citizenship here in America. If you're born on the land of the United States, you're a citizen, yada yada yada, and so on and so forth. It's absolutely insane. And so it's an absolute hell on earth. So it's entirely ridiculous. I don't know why anyone's not talking about that in the news, because as far as things that I would find to make the domestic news, that would be one of them, because it's absolutely outrageous to get an ID to be able to fly around the country. You have to wait for an appointment 3 months from now. It's like, what if you're a citizen of Alabama, say, just in Alabama's case, that has to fly to, say, Washington State and Seattle to conduct business for your company, and right now you cannot conduct any business if your company operates across the entire country and it's based out of Alabama until you wait for 3 months to get a star ID, and then you can finally go fly and represent the businesses of your company.
That's actually not true, believe it or not. You can actually fly without a real ID, to my knowledge. But the catch is, though, if you go try to do that, you're probably going to end up missing your flight, because they're going to put you through extra screening. They're going to start swabbing the fingers and stuff like that to make sure you're not bringing any residue of any type of contraband on board the plane. They're going to put you through some serious screening if you don't show up with a real ID. But the catch is, though, if you have a passport, just show up with your passport and you can fly with that. That's what I'm personally using to fly, is my passport at the moment, because I haven't had a chance to really fool with the star ID thing yet. So they look at you a little bit weird using a passport, but I don't care. I'm like, it's real ID compliant. It's a federal identification. So, the only problem I have with the whole real ID thing right now, I have several different problems with it, but my main problem is they're calling it real ID as if your state identification is like a fake ID. It's like, my state ID is not fake. It's real. It was issued by the state of Alabama, but now we're going to pretend like it's not real ID. It's like, the naming's a bit stupid, and also there's some other problems. So I won't get into that, though, because it's a bit political.
I'll say, though, like, my personal opinion on it, like, just to like air out my personal opinion, real ID feels like an abridgment of states' rights. The states have a right to issue their identification, and it's generally supposed to be accepted through good faith throughout the country that your identification is legitimate. Making it some sort of a federalized system starts to remove the general good faith system that's existed, where the states actually have the sovereignty to be able to say, this person is a citizen of my state, therefore they are generally supposed to be respected by good faith by all other states throughout the United States of America. That's completely being removed as a result of this, and now you're either clearly denoted as a federal citizen, or you really don't even count and you don't get the rights of a normal American citizen. That's a bit of an issue. It's interdicting the freedom of travel that is generally considered to be an understood right of a U.S. citizen, to be able to travel through the country freely. But
I just didn't understand personally. It's like, if we're trying to tie up some loose ends with, like, states issuing licenses that are a little bit too lax with it, like they're not requiring enough identification, like, for example, birth certificate, things like that, like proving that you have residency in the state. Why didn't the federal government simply pass a new law which stated that they are going to standardize the state requirements to get a state ID, instead of federalizing it? They federalized the ID system, basically. So I believe if you get a real ID, you're now in a federal identification database as opposed to a state identification database, which that was a huge controversy, I believe, around it as well. And correct me if I'm getting something wrong with that, but that's the way I understand it. Now the federal government basically administers the Real ID system, in addition to the states having a role in actually signing you up for it. So I don't know. Like to me, it seems like a little bit of a federal government overreach. If you're asking me, that's not a political thing because this was passed way a long time ago. This is
Yeah.
not new. It's just been implemented recently. So many presidents in the past have had the option to say, "Hey, wait a minute, do we really want that, or are we going to implement it?" But they've let it sit until now. So I don't know. I just don't really care for it.
Yeah, I would have to say I don't really care for it too much. I see some people going, "Oh God, what a crybaby!" But here's the thing: it's not being a crybaby. It's on the principle of this country. This country isn't the federal nation, the federal republic of America. It's the United States of America, and so it's generally understood that while the federal government exists as an overarching governmental entity across the country, the states have an equal footing to the federal government, and that was shown clearly through how identification worked in the past, where the state had the sole responsibility of issuing identification and then allowing people to generally travel because of that. Now the system is being federalized. So what it's saying in a sense is you as a citizen of a state in the United States, a union of states, you don't count. You only count if you're a federal citizen. If you can prove that you're a citizen of the federal level of the United States of America, then you can travel. But until then, you're pretty much a substandard citizen at this point, and you have to go and get a whole extra level of identification involved at a federal level to be able to travel. And I see some people saying, well, the freedom of travel isn't being interdicted. But the thing is, though, is that in America, in the modern day, and this is why they did it this way, air is the only way to travel long distance. There are no real, like, Amtrak is a great system, but Amtrak is not that expansive to be able to get you around, and it's also completely it's just completely unusable long distance. It takes you 3 days to get from Chicago to LA. I mean, you can't conduct business taking 3 days by train in the modern age. You have to get across the country in a couple of hours. So they did it with the airlines because they knew everyone in America has to fly by plane. There's no other way to efficiently get around in the modern age. So we're going to make it to where you have to get this ID system here because this is really the only way people travel. Because it's like if you say, oh well, you could take the train or you could drive. I mean, driving from here to LA, if you had to do business in LA, that's just completely unrealistic. And if you took the train, it also takes days. And it's like that's just absolutely uncalled for at this point. I feel like, honestly, just to say this, I feel like the system that we had in place beforehand, where the states issued their IDs and just left it at that, I feel like that would have been a much better sort of a system than putting out this Star ID or Real ID system, as it's being called in other places. But anyways, with that, also, Sir Guy said, 14th Amendment, Section 5 does give the federal Congress authority to regulate citizenship, but also you have birthright citizenship, and generally you're supposed to be operating off of a principle of good faith in the country, and this is also acting like everyone's guilty until proven innocent. This right here is saying everyone is an illegal citizen until they can prove, well, an illegal alien until they can prove otherwise, and that's like saying everyone's a criminal until you can prove otherwise. This country is supposed to operate off of a premise of innocent until proven guilty of all matters, of all facets of life. And so treating everyone that's going into the airport like they're an illegal alien, unless if they can prove to the most undoubted level that they are not an illegal alien, is, to me, it's degrading to the citizens of the United States, in my personal opinion. At least where I'm coming from.
Although one thing I will say, it's a bit funny. I obviously have my personal issues with the Real ID thing. Now, I will admit this. There was a problem that needed to be solved that Real ID is trying to solve. I just don't agree with how far Real ID is going with, for example, federalizing the whole system. I think it's a bit of an overreach, but there was a problem with certain states not properly vetting the people they were issuing state IDs to. That was a bit of a problem in some places, but, that's a bit political. I'm going to leave it at that. But at the same time, though, what gets me is some people that already have U.S. passports are like, I'm not getting the Star ID because if I get the Star ID, I'll be put in a federal database. It's like, well, if you have a passport, you're already in the federal database because you're already in a database that is for U.S. passports. They have to keep track of who they issue a passport to, and that's a database in itself. So, the people that say that, it's a little bit nonsensical at that point, to be honest with you, because I'm like, there's things called no-fly list, for example. If you're on a no-fly list or off the no-fly list, you're in some sort of database already. So they already have a profile on you, and it's not like you're like a secret sovereign citizen or something. You're known to the federal government.
Also, I see a lot of people talking about, like, oh, it's to stop illegal aliens from doing this and doing that. That's at least the explanation now. But when it was pushed forward originally, it was to try and catch terrorists from overseas that are trying to travel around the country and conduct something similar to a 9/11. That was the general premise. I know it's been repackaged nowadays. It's entirely about illegal aliens, but what it really is it's saying everyone's a terrorist until they can prove otherwise, or at least until they can prove that they're a U.S. citizen. That was the original premise behind it, and that's why it had so much pushback for the longest time, because it had nothing to do with illegal aliens. It had to do with pretty much suspecting that everyone was a terrorist off of the bat when you go to the airport. And also on top of that, if that's an issue, which, I mean, let's concede that it is. Let's just say that it is an issue. Why not just pass a federal regulation saying, okay, these states can't just give out IDs to illegal aliens? You don't have to sit there and say, okay, we're going to federalize the whole system now because, none of y'all can act right, so that's why we can't have nice things. This is not how the country works. They should just say, okay, now these states have to go through these additional actions to prove that they're not giving out IDs to aliens, and if they don't, then we'll sue them, and then we'll go through the Supreme Court system. Because the answer to this question isn't stomping on the states' rights to be able to issue identifications to their citizens. That's not really the answer. There was another way to do it. I'm not saying it was a bad idea if that's your premise for saying that this was a good idea, but there was another way to do it while respecting the rights and sovereignty of the states. So that would be my take on it. Not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying that it's, as far as federal overreach, I consider it to be federal overreach. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, because I just gotta be honest with y'all, folks. That's been irking me for the past few days, ever since that happened. Because I was like, this is ridiculous. I stood out there in line for 3 hours for them to finally say, okay, we're not taking walk-ins anymore. They took like 20 of them, and then they just say, okay, we're not taking any more. Everyone get lost. And we were standing out there for 3 hours in 90-degree weather. Like this whole crowd of people were waiting to get one, and they don't tell you that until 3 hours later after you've been waiting in line, and then they go, okay, you're not getting one now. It's just ridiculous, really. And also another thing, folks. One other thing. The real ID, store ID, whatever you want to call it. Like, just really quickly to get through this. Like, people are like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's almost getting to the point, at least in my opinion, with how it's working on a federal level of that, to where it's almost like we're in a communist country where you have to show travel papers and permissions to travel, because the only comparable alternative to traveling domestically now, if you do not have a real ID or a star ID, is a passport. And if you don't know, back in the Soviet Union or back in any Eastern Bloc country, to travel around, you had to have a government-issued passport. That's why the police would ask you for your papers. You had to have a travel passport to travel around. And if you didn't have one, you were not allowed to travel. And this is kind of getting on the border of being something along those lines. But anyways, with that, folks, it is time for us to move on into some more questions. But with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. So before we move into our next super chat real quick, I did ask a poll question because the reason why we asked this poll question is because a lot of channel legends actually have reached out and asked us about this. So we were curious about what the entire audience thought about it. Because obviously, if y'all are not in favor of it, we're not going to do it because we're not going to do something that's going to obviously tick a lot of people off. So the question in the poll says, would you like to see us introduce channel memberships, one tier only, no ranks, and just a simple membership, either you're a member or you're not, on the channel? So it looks like an overwhelming 68% said no, and 32% said yes. So just to clarify this, because I see some people were a little bit confused by it, and some people actually objected to it, and they didn't want it. The channel memberships thing is like the little join button that pops up next to the subscribe button on the channel, and it lets you become a channel member, and it lets you have like, we could choose basically what would be next to your name. Basically, it could be like an LSA flag or something like that. But that's what a channel membership is. So in case people were confused about that and didn't know what it was, that's what it is. But it looks like, if everybody understood the question and knew what that was, it looks like the 68 or actually 69%, nice, were actually in opposition to it. So it looks like it'll be a no-go for now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say that's an interesting result right there, and it looks like we won't be doing that. At least for the foreseeable future. But with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Jesus UCSB, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Jesus, for that support once again. And we do appreciate that very, very much. Hey! And Jesus said, LSA, and so Enforcers, I hope you share my my story, the VA fired me with the Doge cuts. And also, I'm sorry to hear that, Jesus.
Dang.
He said I was all over the news. LSA was gone, but this former VA employee is okay. LSA and Ola.
And
And I'm sorry to hear that, by the way, Jesus. And I hope everything turns out okay with it. Best of luck to you on that one, because I'm sorry to hear it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say, that's a unfortunate thing to hear about Jesus UCSB. I hate to hear that. I actually have been hearing from folks that I know throughout a lot of the armed services that a lot of the civilian contractors that worked alongside the military, a decent amount of them actually ended up getting pretty much deleted out of their jobs. Like pretty much, literally, their job categories just ceased to exist overnight, and they were pretty much out of work. It's been a very unfortunate sort of a thing. And at least from what I've been hearing in some parts of the military, and I don't want to say which ones, but I have been hearing some people saying that that's going to be cutting down on their efficiency to do their jobs because now they're having to take on the work that they were originally supposed to be doing and the work of another civilian contractor that was doing something else to support their unit, and now they're having to do all of it. So that is something that is a little bit interesting, to say the least. But beyond that, I hate to hear that that happened to you as well, Jesus UCSB. But still, it's good to know that you're still a part of the LSA, and hopefully things are still going fine. Nevertheless, because that's always a tough thing to hear that people lose their jobs over one thing or the other, or the ebb and the flow of how the country runs sometimes. But still, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one, also, by the way, I think a lot of people didn't understand what channel memberships were when I ran that poll, because I'm seeing a ton of people asking questions, and it looks like a lot of people believe it's pay to play. That's not what it is. I think that might be a problem, that a lot of people don't even know what a channel membership is. So basically, to explain it, so that way, because I see a lot of like channel legends saying, well, that actually sounds like it'd actually be good. Here's how it would work, just to explain it. And once again, I might run the poll a second time now that I've explained it properly, and we'll see if it's still a no. And if it is, we're not going to do it. But basically, what it is it's a paid donation thing, which is monthly. Like, for example, if we set it like $5 a month or something, it gives you a way to support the channel on a monthly basis. We wouldn't make it a tiered system, by the way. It would be either you're a member or you're not a member, and nothing would change for everybody else. Like, for example, all the members would have is a little like icon next to their name on the chat, and that's the only thing that would change. Outside of that, it would be still the same way we've been doing it the whole time on the channel. It'd be super chats, the live chats from anybody that puts them in the chat, and that would be the end of it. So it's basically as simple as that. I think a lot of people thought that maybe it was like blocking off content or something to make you pay for it. We would never do that on the channel, by the way. That is something we're entirely opposed to. We'll always have our streams like available for anybody to watch. We're not going to put it behind a paywall. That would be honestly quite disgusting, actually. But we would never do that. But just to explain that properly. But Enforcer, would you like to explain anything on it, or just see maybe about running the poll a second time?
Yeah, I'll explain it really quickly, at least with how it's been talked about in the background. This, by the way, folks, is not anything that's hard and set. If a lot of people don't want it, we're not doing it, and like we would never force that on anyone. But to explain how it would generally work, it does not change anything as far as y'all's ability to see any content. It would be something along the lines of sort of a support system, generally like super chats, but something that you're subscribed to monthly. No content, live streams, or videos would ever be put behind a paywall. It would generally just be to try and support the channel on like a monthly basis, and it'd be an incredibly low amount. It would be about a $5 monthly membership. That's the only tier that we would have, and that's about it. But that's generally how it works. If you want to run the poll again, Matthew, you can. But we'll see what people think about it a second time, I guess. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat here. This one goes to Marion Deemert, who puts in a $30 donation. And thank you very much, Marion, as well, for that support. And it's good to see you once again. And Marion said you both rock, and thank you very much.
And I thank you so much for the support, Marion Deemer, and thank you for saying that we both rock. We try our best, and I'm glad to know that you're still enjoying this channel and helping it to keep on running. So with that, I got to thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Rye Guy SR, who puts in a 30. And thank you very much, Rye Guy, as well, for that $30 support. He said, I'm also working, and y'all make work much more bearable, and keep up the good work. And it seems though Russia is ready to FAFO with the US and NATO. And LLT LSA, Slava Ukraine, and take one from the live chat.
Hey, and I gotta thank you massively for support, Rye Guy SR. And I gotta say, thank you so much for saying that. We make work a lot more bearable. We hope that we're helping a lot of hardworking Americans out there to pass their hours through work a lot easier and a lot more smoothly. And I gotta say, it's great to know, Rye Guy, that we're helping you out to be able to do that. And I gotta say that it really does seem like Russia's starting to push the envelope, for sure. At least at this point, they're really starting to escalate a great deal, and it's getting fairly concerning. But hopefully, the United States will be able to make the right actions. And if war is inevitable, we took every single chance possible to be able to make sure that we got some sort of a peace with dignity, but not a peace at all costs. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again for support. And we will make sure to take one from the live chat in your honor. So, with that, what do we got in the live chat, Matthew?
All right, so the live chat question in honor of Ragai SR is going to go to none other than Miss Disa, who said, "Did Europe cut off all gas from Russia into Europe?"
Uh, we have not heard that they have. There's actually some gas that is still making it into Europe at this point, from what we know. But that generally seems to be the case, at least at the moment. But I do thank you so much for the support, Ryan Guy SR. I hope that does address that live chat incredibly well. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Luke UK, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, good sir, as well for that support. He said, "Hello, Enforcers. And my question is, how many Russian nuclear warheads would it take to turn to UK into a nuclear wasteland? And thank you, Enforcers."
And I got to thank you for the support, Luke. And it would take generally about 1,000 nuclear weapons, from what we know. About 1,000 nuclear warheads of the strategic scale would generally wipe Russia clean. It would be the nuclear apocalypse that a lot of people are always thinking about in their minds. So that generally would be the case. At least from what we know, a significant portion of the Russian population would get wiped out as a result of that. About a third. Well, actually, it would be about 40% in the first 30 minutes, and then within the next year, it would be another 40%. So only about 20% of the Russian population living right now would survive to see the second year. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A huge thanks to you once again for support and helping us to keep this channel running, Luke UK, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and address the poll right now, as it looks like the results are pretty much set. Once again, I asked the question, would you like the channel memberships? Totally optional. It looks like it's almost evenly split. It looks like a lot more people changed their mind after we told the explanation. So I think a lot of people didn't understand what we were talking about, really. But it looks like 52% said yes and 48% said no. So on this one, honestly, it looks like it's almost evenly split. So maybe we'll think it over, but it sounds like not a majority of people, or not a huge majority, are wild about it. So we might revisit it maybe later, or at least just discuss it and maybe just, put it on the back burner for now. But Enforcer, what say you?
Yeah, I think we'll probably put that on the back burner for now. It doesn't really seem like a lot of people are a big fan of that. And generally, we want to make sure that everyone is happy to be here. If it's not like the channel, just really quickly to say this, it's not like the channel is really about the money. It's more so about what we do for the country, getting out the good news to all the folks, or at least well-researched news out there. And I don't really want it to look like the channel is entirely about the money side of things, or trying to make sure that the channel is, just doing swimmingly well, at least on the monetary side. We do fairly good as it is, so this isn't a make or break thing to me at all. But I do hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one goes to Daniel McMurray, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, good sir, Daniel, for that support. Also, excuse me, by the way. He said, "Love the channel, and you guys are my only news, and keep up the amazing information." And Marion.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Daniel McMurray. And I gotta say thank you for loving the channel, and thank you so much for saying that you use this as your primary news source. We try our best to make sure that we keep this channel running day in and day out, 6 days a week, every single day that we can, except for Mondays. That's our off day, every single year. And I'm glad to know that folks like you enjoyed this channel a lot and are helping us to keep it running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep up this kind of level of information and detail of everything happening around the world every day for all of y'all to hear about. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that addressed that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I wanted to address this myself real quick. Let's see here. Some people are like Mike are saying, I appreciate that y'all are more interested in the viewers than the money. It's cool to hear you make a poll on that. That was something we discussed in the background quite a bit before we even ran that poll. We're not interested in turning this into like a pay to play thing ever. We've never wanted it to be like that. So that's why we ran the poll like that, because we don't want to turn something on and then obviously make it look like it's tacky or something. But the only reason we asked it is because a lot of people in the background were emailing us about it. So we were curious how many people really wanted it versus did not want it. So, obviously, thanks to all the super chat support, we're able to do this without doing memberships or something. Now, obviously, if for example, the super chats or something like that weren't, obviously keeping us like around and also covering the expenses of doing the channel, it might be a different question then. But, thankfully, due to y'all's generous support, we're able to keep doing this on a daily basis. So we're not going to, do something that y'all are not in favor of, since y'all very generously support the channel voluntarily. Because of course we want to keep it, free for everybody, open to everybody, and not put it behind a paywall, because that's just, plain tacky.
I would have to agree. Generally, I'm not a massive proponent of memberships, never really have been. And I've been saying for years that I feel like it generally stratifies the chat, even at a lower level of membership or multiple tiers of membership. It makes people feel like there's a social hierarchy here, and whoever pays the most gets the most deference or preference from us. And I generally don't like the case of that. Generally, I do have to say the channel is a business, and we do run this thing to make a living. I can't really deny that. But at the same time, I also think that the kind of social impact that this channel has had for a lot of people has been incredibly profound. It's a channel that anyone can come to any single day of the week. There's never an ad that runs on these live streams. Videos is a different story, but on the live streams, there's never a single ad that ever runs or is supposed to run. And y'all can come here and get the news every single night in raw, full form. We get supported by super chats, and we've kept this thing running for years that way. My general philosophy, to just be completely frank with y'all, at least to me, is that if we're not bringing enough in super chats, there's not enough people enjoying the show any longer to really justify its continued operation. But that's my general opinion on that. But still, I generally like to believe that the channel runs more so for the kind of impact it has on informing the citizens of the United States and citizens of other great countries around the Western world on what's actually going on out there in the world every day. And beyond that, it does run as a business, but its impact socially is more profound than its impact almost in like a way to the shareholders, at least in my opinion. I like to think that we run this thing sort of old-fashioned, where it's not necessarily about the money, it's more so about the kind of impact that we have. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat here, while I grab one more thing, put it in the spreadsheet. Our next one is going to go to Marion Deemer, once again, who puts in a 20 and said, for Marie and hugs.
Hey, and I got to thank you so much for the support, Mario Deemert. And I got to say, thank you so much for throwing in the support for Mary.
It's Marion. It's Marion. I forgot to put the end at the end.
I was about to say Mario. I was like, I never heard of Mario Deemer. I was like, are you related to Marion Deemer? Like, that's why, dude, I was so confused, actually. I was very confused about that. But beyond that, thank you so much for the support, Marion Deemer. And thank you for giving out the hugs for Marie. And also, Matthew, have we gotten an update on Marie LSA, by the way?
So unfortunately, I have to get a little bit serious on this one instead of making jokes about what I was just joking about there. But unfortunately, we have not heard from Marie. And obviously we can't come to any conclusions without information, so we can't say for a fact, but it's been a long time and she hasn't been in the live chat for a very long time. The last we heard, she was not in the best of health, like we had mentioned before. So I would love to give everybody an update, but she was a consistent chatter and she was always on the channel as well. So we're obviously, concerned about what happened, but we just have no way of knowing. That's the sad part about, being on the internet. We don't usually know who all the chatters are. So for example, if someone's been here for a long time, there is no way for us to reach out and check on that person that's been here that we've become to know on the channel. There's no way for us to find out unless we chatted with them before, like on Discord or something. So we just can't say.
I would have to say, hopefully she's all right. I also want to say, folks, it may not be a bad scenario. Some people just go missing for a while, and then they reappear in a couple of months or something along those lines. We do know that Marie LSA wasn't in the greatest of health when she was last seen here on the channel, but that doesn't always mean the worst case scenario. Sometimes they just go through a bad period and they come back. Hopefully we'll eventually hear back from Marie LSA, because I actually thought that Marie LSA was back, and everyone was like, for Marie, and then I was also thinking maybe this is the worst case scenario and she just passed. I was like, I'm not really sure which. That's why I had to ask. But Beyond that, hopefully Marie Elsa is okay and she'll be returning. And if not, we'll have to try and eventually see if someone will reach out and tell us what's up with Marie Elsa, if she's okay or not, or whether she's just taking a break from the news, because some people do that. Hopefully everything's good, though. But still, a big thanks to you for the support, Marion Deemer. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So moving on to our next super chat. This one is going to go to, let's see. Also, by the way, like I just got to say this because it's kind of an unfortunate thing that we knew. Marie LSA, we believed was terminal. I believe she said she was terminal, and I believe she might have been going into hospice care or something of that nature. So that's the part that's got a lot of people worried. She was also, she was on up there with the age as well. So that was a concern as well. So I would love to have closure on the issue as much as other people would like to have closure on it. But like I said, we just have no way to like reach out and ask, which of course is a lot worse in my opinion than not knowing what happened. So I hate that we can't get y'all an answer because we'd like to know too. But unfortunately, I think it will probably stay there unless maybe a family member or something reaches out, which has happened in the past. We've been reached out to by a channel member as well in the past, and we're told the information, which was unfortunately bad news. But hopefully, or maybe we'll hear something with Marie as well. But jumping on to our next one, this one goes to Jonathan Garcia, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Jonathan, as well for that support. He said, what point of sanctions against Russia until they have nothing to lose using any WMD type weapon, and especially if war with NATO is almost imminent? And thank you guys and LSA.
That's a great question, Jonathan. And honestly, the truth is that the second round of sanctions, if India stops consuming Russian oil, would be that. That would push them to the limit where that would be a likelihood. But once again, I do want to lay out, though, that it's not like, just overnight they fire nukes at us. There are escalation steps because nobody wants to die, and if the Russians fire off their nuclear weapons, they're going to end up getting killed. Like, there's no way for them to avoid that. That's a reality of their life and that kind of a decision. If we fire nukes at the Russians, high likelihood we're all going to get killed in this country. If they fire nukes at us, it's a high likelihood all of them are going to end up getting killed in the process of that in our return fire. So generally, everyone always wants to work off of an escalatory step ladder, meaning that they would go conventional first and they would start a ground war in Europe, even if they knew they were going to lose it, just that way they could start working up the escalatory step ladder. Because that's generally how it's understood both by the Russians and the U.S. And our military doctrine also exhibits that sort of action where a conventional ground war starts first, and then once one side starts to lose really badly, they whip out the tactical nuclear weapons, and then the other side whips out their tactical nuclear weapons. They pretty much tactically nuke each other's armies into oblivion in Europe, and then by that point, someone's still going to be winning once the ashes start settling. Someone's still going to be pushing one way or the other, either west or east, and by that point, that's when the strategic nuclear weapons come out, and in a sense, the world as we know it ends. Not everyone would die. A third of everyone would live into the second year and then live beyond that. But generally, society, civilization, technologies we know it would all cease to exist once those bombs fell. And it would take a while to be rebuilt. Not to say it's not going to turn into Fallout 4, by the way, folks. Society would be rebuilt. And actually, the IRS, just in case y'all don't know this, some people will be like, hooray, I don't have to pay taxes. Oh, no, the IRS actually has a system set up to where they still will be collecting taxes, even after the bombs fall. There's already a plan to make sure that the next tax year will already be working and operational, even in the midst of the nuclear apocalypse. The government, at least in the United States and in Russia, actually is designed to pretty much be indestructible. Yes, the president of the United States might get killed, most of the Congress might get killed, and pretty much the entire Duma and the president of Russia could also get killed as well. But there are people that are already designated in line, in place, in every single situation to take over the management of the government and to keep it running, even if all of those people ended up getting killed in a nuclear exchange. So the government would still be operational. The United States would still exist, and our flag would still be flying over this country. It's just that within a year's time from then, not a lot of people in Russia or America is going to be alive to see the flag rising over the country at the rising of the sun. So that's the kind of the issue with that. But generally, everyone understands you're kind of betting against the odds to expect you'll survive a nuclear exchange. So it won't be going nuclear off of the bat. It would be something that would generally end up escalating to that. But as far as the catalyst to start that escalation, the secondary wave of sanctions that may be coming on August 8th are those very sanctions. Like, those are the ones that actually might start to get this thing rolling. But with that, I hope that addresses that the best it can. A huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I also see a lot of people like, what the hell, are you serious? Like, about the IRS. I saw someone say, bruh. Actually, it's true, everyone. I'm not even lying. The IRS and every other government department has it's called continuity of government. It's a general design theory that we came up with back in the 50s to design the government in a way that it would survive any sort of exigent circumstance, including a nuclear apocalypse. So the government actually will continue to function. So it won't descend into absolute chaos and anarchy, at least for long. It will be generally lawless in a lot of places, but from the municipal level to the federal level, some forms of government will continue to exist. And also, if we see that nuclear war starts to become inevitable, or it looks like it's going to start becoming highly likely, I can promise y'all that the civil defense, the modern version of civil defense, which is FEMA pretty much, will be coming out with ads on TV telling y'all what y'all can do to try and heighten your chances of survival, although they're slim. And also, they'll be passing around information to the state. Well, the states will be passing around information through the state governments. The federal government will be passing information through the federal government. And then all the municipal governments will also be trying to structure continuity of government operations. So that way, even after the nuclear apocalypse happens, there will be some semblance of order. It won't go completely lawless, but the situation will be very strenuous and incredibly challenging, especially in the first weeks after a nuclear exchange, if you survive.
The good news, good news is if you're a U.S. citizen and you're taken hostage, you can get hostage tax relief. That's the good news.
Yeah, that is good news. But the IRS, the taxes has got to be paid, and they're gonna keep y'all gonna keep paying. If we survive, we will also still be paying. I don't know how YouTube will pay us because we get paid via internet direct deposit. So I don't really know how they'll pay us for us to pay the IRS. I don't know how any of that would work anymore, but we would have to see. But still. I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least for all of those who do not know about that, because hopefully that would give you all a little bit of comfort to think that, it doesn't turn into like Mad Max or something where, you're fighting for the water. You're still going to be in the United States. It's just it's going to be a lot more slimmed out, and pretty much most everything y'all know in the modern day and age technologically will have ceased to exist. So y'all pretty much be back in about the 17th or 18th century technologically, but the government will still run. So with that, I hope that
also, by the way, for the people laughing about hostage tax relief, it's actually, I think, a real thing, actually. But the catch is, though, you don't get excused from paying your taxes or something. You just get an extension or maybe removal of penalties. They'll consider removing the penalties for your late filing if you got taken hostage by like Hamas or something like that. They'll say, okay, tell us what happened. You'll be like, I got taken hostage by Hamas. I couldn't pay my taxes. They'll say, okay, I will give you an extension, and then you have to pay your taxes. So you're not getting out of it or anything like that. You just gotta file it a little bit later.
Oh yeah, you're not escaping taxes, damn it. Like, yeah, you're not getting out of that. What do y'all think this is? Some sort of a forgiving system? Taxes will be paid. But let's see. I see some people saying all kinds of stuff about what the post-apocalyptic world would look like. Oh goodness, y'all, it's actually gonna be terrible. Like, if you survive, you can kind of count yourself a little lucky. Me, honestly, folks, I wouldn't want to, I'm just gonna be honest with y'all. If a nuclear exchange happens, I hope to die in the blasts, because I would not want to be around to see what America's gonna be looking like after a nuclear apocalypse. It's gonna be tough. There's gonna be a lot of stuff that comes back around that would be nasty, because it's gonna be an emergency situation. Martial law is going to be declared throughout the whole country by that point, before the nuclear bombs are even fired. And so that will generally be giving the military deference, or the police to operate almost as paramilitary forces deference to do what they need. So if you're caught doing a basic crime, there's going to be special courts. This is generally the plan, at least. This is very similar in Britain and America. There actually would be special courts that are made to pretty much try you on the spot. And the punishments are most likely going to be severe, because there's really not going to be enough resources to keep prisoners in jail or prison, for that matter. So most likely at that point, generally from what we know, summary executions would become incredibly common. So I wouldn't really want to be around for that kind of a thing, because with resources being scarce and a lot of people probably having to resort to looting to even try and get basic food, the punishments would be incredibly severe if you were caught looting. It would be rough. So with that, I hope that does address that well, but still, America's got a plan. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Eric Hutchins, who puts in a 20, and thank you very much, Eric, as well for that support. He said, what if the U.S. Care if Canada, UK, and India canceled F-35s? We do know that India has canceled the F-35 purchases. They did cancel them. So India is apparently going to look to maybe China to get aircraft, I guess. The UK and Canada, I'm not aware if they've canceled their F-35 purchases. I don't think they have.
No, actually, the UK is still finalizing their purchases. They have a lot of them already. So the UK is not canceling their purchases because they're already in too deep, and they still have to get spare parts and supplies from America. So they're strategically dependent on the United States for their air forces right now. And Canada most likely won't pause it either, because no matter the little spitting matches that the US government and Canada have had recently, we're still great friends. Don't be mistaken about that. This whole deal will pass. And so Canada wants to continue to get American jets. India, on the other hand, they canceled because it was kind of like thrust on them. If you remember, Matthew, like the president was like, "Would you like one?" And we were both like, "This sounds like a bad idea to give them one." And then they shot it down. If anything, India will just go back to France and buy more Rafale from them. Which is a really
Yeah,
weird
maybe.
name to pronounce. Yeah, but that's why I think they do. Because if you look at their Air Force right now, it's pretty French heavy in terms of the equipment they get. So I think they just go back to France. They're sure as hell not buying from the Chinese, because the Chinese are supporting the Pakistanis. So if they're both being supported by the Chinese, then the Chinese get a lot of say on India's national defense, which China is already pretty much operating to their detriment in national defense by supporting Pakistan. So I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Shroom Smuggler, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Shroom Smuggler, as well for that support. They said, has there been any reports of Chinese military buildups near Taiwan? And it could be possible the Russian Zapad 2025 drills in Belarus could invade the Baltics, while China will also attack Taiwan at the same time. And what do you think?
I would have to say that there has been a lot of war games around Taiwan, but I haven't really seen much to say that they're going to be starting a war. Now the deputy foreign minister has said that war is inevitable at this point. It's just that we don't know when, and I'm still thinking that's going to be towards the earlier part of 2027 at the earliest. That's quite literally the earliest it can be, because they still have to build up their navy to be able to conduct an amphibious invasion of a large enough size to actually have an impact. So I don't think it'll be happening simultaneously, but if Russia wants to start a greater war in Europe, the Zapad 2025 military exercises is the perfect cover for that sort of a deal. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and a huge thanks to you once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Rebel117, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you, Rebel, as well for that support. They said, if Russia goes bankrupt, will Putin rely more on forcing his troops to keep fighting with a gun to their backs like they are right now?
I would say yes. If Russia's going bankrupt, they may not have enough money to pay their soldiers, so they might start to create blocking units behind them to stop them from deserting, or to possibly put down any sort of uprisings. Those soldiers get paid. The blocking units get paid. The frontline troops might not get paid. So I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to El Cueva, who puts in the 20. And thank you very much, El Cueva, for that support. They said, keep up the good work, the great work, great work.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, El Cuva. And thank you so much for wanting us to keep up the great work. Thanks to folks like you, we hopefully will be able to for a very long time into the future. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
El Cueva used to call me on the cell phone. but anyways, just joking. But moving on to our next super chat here. This one is going to go to Alex Johnson, who just threw in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Alex, for that 20. And we do appreciate that. He said, fun fact, but do you guys know about the 2 Mark 39 hydrogen bombs that were developed in North Carolina in 1961? And would love to hear you guys bring it up and get your reaction.
And that is a great question, actually, Alex Johnson, because those were dropped. Those were dropped. There's actually a nuclear bomb somewhere in North Carolina right now, and we don't really know where it is. It's somewhere in the ground, on the eastern coast, buried, but we don't know where it is. and it might be armed right now. We don't really know because it's corroding over time. So eventually it might arm itself, or one of its arming mechanisms may fail, and then it accidentally arms itself. But yeah, there's actually a nuclear bomb, a Mark 39, which is a fairly large one that's just sitting somewhere out in North Carolina. We don't know where it is. Like, just to make that a little bit clear. So what happened, to explain to all of y'all why that's the case? There was a bomber, I believe it was a B-52, that was flying over North Carolina that ran into some really serious issues. It pretty much suffered a critical failure. I think it broke up in air, and the Mark 39s just fell out of the B-52 and into the ground. One of them was found, and I need to go find, I forgot what the incident's called. Let's see. I think it's
Broken
called...
arrows.
I think it's the Goldsboro incident. Yeah, I think this is it. Yeah, the 1961 Goldsboro crash. This is it. Here's one of the bombs. This is the one that they found. The other one they didn't find. And this one actually, I think there was 4 arming devices on this one, and 3 out of the 4 arming devices had actually armed while it was in free fall. So it was one arming system away from being armed and air bursting over the ground. I think a couple of 100 feet up. So quite a serious close call. I think, let's see here. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. It said, was judged by nuclear weapons engineers to be only one safety switch away from detonation. So there almost was a nuclear detonation over North Carolina back in the 60s. But let me...
Could you imagine, like, digging around or something, like, and just happen to hear a dink? Oh, you're like, what's that? You dig a little further, and all of a sudden you see like the outline of like with the missing nuke. It's like, oh my god! It's like that's a situation where you might want to call before you dig, or call after you dig, or something like that.
Yeah, make sure to call your local municipality. You might be hitting a pipeline or a nuke. Like, you can't really tell in North Carolina. But I think, if I remember correctly, one of these is still missing. Let's see. Also, apparently someone realized afterwards that the Mark 39 didn't have enough fail-safes to be an airborne alert bomb in the B-52, because it might fall out of the plane and end up blowing up. So, interesting to know that they found that out after the fact. Good to know that they were safety conscious, though, after this happened, and they conducted multi-years long analysis to be like, yeah, it doesn't really seem that safe, so that way they could remove it from remove it from at least airborne alert. But, let's see here. See, consequences.
Honestly, I'll say this: if you're ever digging anywhere and you hear the sound dink, that's like the sound you never want to hear in your life, because you're either hitting, like the enforcer just mentioned, you're hitting a water main or something, you're hitting something that is metal, which is obviously probably something you don't want to be digging on, or you're hitting a utility line of some sort. That's a bad sound. I've never really heard that dink sound when I'm digging anywhere, because I rarely ever go like digging around. Not like a husky or a dog or something like that. I'm not just going around digging, but that would be a bad sound to hear, I will say.
Yeah, I'd have to say. But let's see. I'm trying to see. There's got to be some mention of the one that's missing. But there is one that's missing out there. And also, this is what a Mark 39 looks like. It honestly looks like a lipstick tube, really.
Yeah, it kind of does. It kind of looks like that, those little like Vicks like vapor tube things that you like put on your nose and clear your sinuses out. It looks like that.
Yeah, honestly, dude, it honestly looks like a normal household appliance, but this is that spicy kind that explodes. But still, this is a crazy incident. I've heard about it a little bit, but there is a nuclear bomb that's missing out there somewhere. So if you're traveling through North Carolina, somewhere near to the area of that airbase, be a little bit careful, because it happened near to Goldsboro at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. I think just a little bit north of here, somewhere near Faro. I think, if I remember correctly. I was literally just reading the article. I don't know why in the world I wouldn't have read pertinent information like that, but it happened somewhere near Faro. So be careful if you're out near that area. One day it might just go up, and you'll never know until it happens. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least if I'm getting that story correct. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, East Malibu said they still got those Vicks things. They still do have them, by the way. I had one a while back when I was having like winter issues with the nose and things like that. They work pretty good. They will blast your sinuses away. Like, they really will. Like, they really do work. They are strong, very strong. And the smell is that like classic like Vicks smell or whatever. So it's like kind of like nostalgic a little bit. So yeah, they're still around, but they're expensive as hell though. Like a 2-pack of those things are like, I don't know what it was, but it was like pretty expensive for just a 2-pack. I think it was almost like $10 or something. I can't remember for certain.
Oh,
But
but
moving on to our next super chat.
before
Yep.
we move on, someone said, "Hey, what about that guy who dropped the drop? Let's see, who said that? Let me go find that. Oh, Tom Hanksman said, "What about the silo worker that dropped the socket off of his ratchet wrench?" Oh yeah, that guy, the guy who blew up a whole ICBM silo with an active nuclear warhead in it. Yeah, that happened. Here's a picture of the aftermath. So a guy dropped a little attachment to his ratchet wrench down the silo on accident, and when it dropped, it bounced off of the wall, bounced back into the ICBM, and pierced one of the thinner parts of its skin near to a fuel tank. So the whole silo started to fill with noxious gas from the fuel that was leaking out, and so they all had to run out. So then they were like, damn, if we leave this thing alone, it could just end up going off. So we better try and figure out a way to fix this thing, or otherwise it could go off. So they tried their best to try and fix the situation, and then eventually it just blew up. I forgot if people were inside or not when it blew up. It's the 1980 Damascus Titan missile explosion. That's the technical name. But it blew up, and it flung the whole warhead of the Trident, the MIRV, out of the silo. Literally flung the blast door off. It flew a couple of 100 feet away, and those things are dozens of tons. It's the weight of an Abrams that just went flying through the air a couple 100 feet away. And then the actual MIRV itself also flew out in the explosion and went flying, I think it was like a quarter of a mile away, and then buried itself into the dirt, and then they had to go find it and dig it out and take it away. But this was a pretty wild sort of an incident. Another kind of a close call where a whole bunch of nuclear warheads could have gone off because the whole MIRV flew out of the silo intact and went flying off into the woods somewhere. So yeah, this one's a little quiet. This one's a little crazy, but a little bit under the rug too. Not a lot of people talk about it. But apparently we have breaking news. What do we have, Matthew?
So we do have some breaking news coming out right this late hour of the night. It is currently midnight Central Time, where the Enforcer HQ is, and right now we're getting some interesting news wires coming out. The U.S. President Trump will make an announcement from the Oval Office at 4:30 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. That just came out a short while ago, so apparently it's going to be a pretty large announcement. That the fact it's coming from the Oval Office, and also simultaneously, we're getting an idea of what most likely it's about. The Kremlin just stated that improving relations between Russia and the United States requires overcoming the current stalemate, and that's going to require a lot more time. Keep in mind that tomorrow, Witkoff, the negotiator for the United States, was supposed to meet with Putin in the Kremlin on tomorrow, I think midday. So it sounds like the conversation has already probably hit a roadblock, and the president is already making plans tomorrow to make a statement from the Oval Office, probably most likely, in my opinion, to maybe go ahead and announce sanctions against the Russian Federation, or maybe give an update on the situation. I could be wrong, but I have a feeling that's probably what this is about. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that's incredibly interesting to hear, and we'll have to wait and see what his statements are tomorrow. But with that, thank you for sharing the breaking news, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Foxglow, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Mr. Fox, for that support. He said, I also think China isn't capable of doing an effective beach landing as it stands, but what if they were able to go with the other proposed strategy and blockade it instead until they are prepared, and they could do it at any time?
That's a good question, Foxglow. The reason why is because while they could blockade it and eventually starve them out, pretty much, the problem is that with modern wars, time is always the enemy in any war, and a besieged enemy generally has the advantage in a sense. Because that's always how it worked back in the day with sieges of old. Anyone who was ever besieged, the besieged actually had the advantage. They could just wait it out. You had to keep your armies supplied, you had to keep them fed, you had to keep them on alert 24/7. You had to eventually try and take the place, like Taiwan, which is pretty much a fortress in the sea. And that ends up buying time, where Taiwan could either get international support, reinforcements, people could start to hit China with heavy sanctions, a whole bunch of issues like that. So generally, China wants to pull this off so quickly that an issue cannot really be made too much of it. So generally, China wants to work on a timetable where they would be able to start this thing and wrap it up in a couple of short months. Because trying to blockade them for about a year and keep that going for that long, that could start to create situations where foreign intervention would occur, and then the situations become a lot more complicated and a lot more damaging for the Chinese. So they want to make sure. That's why I'm saying 2027 is the go time, if any would be, because they want to make sure that they are so ready to pull this off, they could probably try and win it in a couple of months, where the international community wouldn't really have that much of a time to respond. In a couple of months sounds like a lot of time to be able to make a response, but in the realistic sort of a sense, in the diplomatic world, a couple of months is a very short amount of time. Usually things evolve over years. So if they're able to win it by then, it's not that big of a deal. People might be unhappy with China, but what's done is done now, and most people are going to have to get back on with conducting business. So that's generally the reason why I think they wouldn't go with a blockade and eventually just try and wear them down over a long period of time. They're going to try and pull this thing off rapidly to make sure that the same thing that happened to Russia doesn't happen to them. So with that, I hope that is addressed the best I can. A huge thanks to you once again, Floxglow, for a great question, actually. Really good question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Swappa23, who puts in a 15. And thank you very much, Swappa, as well for that support. They said, why is India being pressured over Russian oil when NATO member Turkey imports more by percentage and no one says a word? And keep up the great job, boys. And officially, 3 years of listening to you lads.
And I got to say, a huge thanks to you, Swappa23, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say that India is being pressured over Russian oil because while percentage-wise Turkey buys more, money-wise India buys more. So it's kind of like saying if you have $10 and I have $100 and you're buying $6 worth of Russian oil, but I'm buying 60. Well, actually, no, if you're buying $7 worth of Russian oil and I'm buying 60, technically by percentage, you're buying more. And that isn't really a good metric because as far as damaging the Russians economically the most damage would come from stopping India or China from buying their oil. Because they're much larger monetary purchasers of it in terms of monetary figures than percentages. So that's generally why we're trying to pressure the Indians the most. But also Turkey should stop as well, because Turkey is on up there as one of the largest consumers. I think they're number 3 or 4, and they certainly should not be allowed to continue because they're also a NATO member, and they would then be operating out of strategic interest of NATO itself, outside of the strategic imperatives of NATO itself. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A huge thanks to you once again for support. Great question, by the way. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Dade Carnes, also known as Raid, who puts in a 10. He said, question from Big Bass Heavy. If Taiwan already had a nuclear deterrent, would China still be behaving the way they are?
China would be still trying to threaten the Taiwanese with the low-level coercion efforts, but they wouldn't be saying that they would invade them, because the Taiwanese would just respond, "We'll nuke you," and then that pretty much ends up defeating the whole argument. It's kind of like how the United States would probably want to deal with North Korea at this point, if they could, if they knew that they weren't going to possibly get South Korea, Japan, or the U.S. nuked in the process. So it's kind of a similar thing. If Taiwan had any kind of a nuclear deterrent, that probably would stop the Chinese from doing most of anything to Taiwan beyond low-level coercion efforts and trying to create a diplomatic initiative or a united front against them on a diplomatic level. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Michael Richards. Kramer, is that you? I'm just joking, but he puts in a $10 donation. Also, I don't even know if the Kramer actor's name is Michael Richards. I think it's something else, actually. I'm not sure, but it sounded familiar. But seriously, though, thank you very much, Michael, for that $10 support. He said,
it is.
Thank you, guys. Oh, it actually is?
Yeah,
this isn't Michael. Actually him, is it? Like, I'm joking, but surely this isn't like the Kramer, like, surely.
Oh, I don't know, but his name is Michael Richards, so it might be.
Huh. Maybe so. But anyways, Michael, whatever the case is, thank you very much for the support. He said, thank you, guys. I listen every evening, and no one else is telling any of us this stuff. And I believe someone, you two, need to keep up the good work, and most of the public is going to freak out when they find out.
And I thank you so much for the support. And we pretty much are one of the few voices in news out there that covers this kind of stuff, this kind of a depth or degree around the world. But I also have to agree with you, Michael. I think you're right that a lot of the public would freak out if they hear this stuff. But the thing is to me, I don't think folks should panic. To not sound cynical, but we're all going to die someday. Like, not to say that, we ought to hurry it up or anything, but we're all going to die someday. And if this is going to happen, it's just going to happen. It's what happens in our time. And people have got to understand that, it's not always going to be a cakewalk. Not everything's going to turn out well. We've got to be ready for whatever comes, whether it be good or bad. I just hate the idea, because you're actually right about that the public will freak out, because the public in general as an entity is a very scary thing, actually, because they are generally a ravenous mob when you deal with them at a mob level. They will panic. Like, I remember when the pandemic was going on, people were running into the stores and just yanking out toilet paper. Like, there was a shortage of everything. And it was absolutely insane because there was no reason to do that. Like, if people had been calm and collected, things would have gone a lot better on the supply side of things. We're still reeling from the supply side effects of the pandemic to this day, and it's because people freaked out. If people would just stay calm and manage their fears, because I would have to agree, everyone, it's scary to me as well that this could end up becoming a third world war. But at the same time, the logical side of me that's not driven by fear goes, the United States has done everything it can at this point to try and avoid this. If this happens, it happens. It has to happen at this point. There's nothing else we can do. But at the same time, there is one thing that we can do, and that's to make sure that we stay calm, that we stay collected, that we listen to our civil authorities in the advent of an emergency, and that we make sure that the whole nation moves forward together. Because if you're trying to take care of yourself way too much, and you start hoarding goods or toilet paper or food or something like that to the point that there's shortages in the store, all you're doing is making our situation as a nation worse. You always have to remain calm, even in the face of death itself. Staying calm is the best sort of a thing that you can do, because if you lose your cool and you start to freak out, it's not making the situation any better. Even if it's a bad situation, that's not making it better. That's making the whole situation a whole lot worse. And I wish a lot of people would get that and understand that, because back in the day, I feel like people did get that, because back in the day, people would approach wars as, I don't really want to fight one, but if we got to fight one, we've got to fight it, and it's a job to do. And a lot of people don't really get that kind of stuff these days, that not everything's always going to be great and not everything's going to have a good end. Some, you might end up dying doing something that you have to do. But you can't freak out about it. It's just the job that we have to do, and whatever happens, happens. And if you die, that was very unfortunate. And if you don't, that's great. But then there's still even more work to do beyond that. But I hope that does address that the best I can. A huge thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you so much for the kind words. As we try our best, and hopefully people wouldn't freak out about this stuff too much, because it's just what's happening, and there's not really much more we can do, and we've done everything that we can at this point. But still, a massive thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, a big shout out to Zyper Sniper 1, by the way, who threw in a 20. Zyper, sorry for missing that. I think it came in maybe during the crazy segment when the chat was screwing up, so that's probably why I missed it. And also, a big PSA for everybody. If I missed your super chat because that chat was acting up and going berserk and not showing the chats, let me know. Like, feel free to tag me in the live chat and let me know, because it's possible I might have missed more than one because they didn't show up for whatever reason when the chat was screwing up. So sorry about that. And also, hopefully YouTube gets that fixed. But Zyper Sniper put in the 20, and he said coffee fund for the enforcers, and it's a new game coming out soon called Glory to the Heroes, and it's based on the Russia-Ukraine war. And question to the chat, please.
And let me go pull that up really quickly on my side screen. Oh, wow. That actually looks like a really good game. Oh my goodness. Dude, honestly, I kind of want to show this on Steam. It's coming out at the latter part of this year. I want to make this clear. We're not sponsored by them or anything, but I'll show you all the page on Steam. Matthew, this actually looks like an amazingly good game. I mean, look at this. This is crazy.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to download that to my MacBook.
So it looks like you can play as the Russians or the Ukrainians in this game, but that is crazy looking. I mean, the graphics on this are actually pretty damn good. I mean, crazy looking. I'm really impressed by this. Really neat kind of a game. Really modern as well, coming out about a war that is still going on. But it's quite realistic looking, actually, I would have to say. And a lot of games are just getting eerie with how accurate they can get. Because some games out there, like there's a game that I've been playing a lot recently, just gotten addicted to, called Broken Arrow. But beyond the scale of how far the weapons can shoot, which is greatly diminished in that game for scale reasons, it's very realistic in how modern warfare actually works. You can actually use real doctrinal practice in that game, and it actually does a lot better than doing whatever you want. And that's really it's really crazy how a lot of games are getting such a good grasp on displaying how war works on a strategic or tactical level. in a game, because they used to say this isn't Call of Duty, war isn't Call of Duty, but nowadays some video games are getting so realistic with what they try and portray beyond the suffering and anguish of war that it may as well be a representation of war itself. But still,
Yeah, like honestly, Call of Duty is so accurate, like that slide maneuver and stuff, and also like I'll tell you, it's like top tier milsim.
man, Call of Duty, I hate Call of Duty so much. I've just got to be honest with
It
you.
kind of sucks.
Yeah, it kind of sucks. There is one game though that I was actually showing to Matthew, and I was wanting to see if he would get it, but he can't because it's not accessible on like Xbox or anything. But it's this game. By the way, I want to say this really quickly. This game is so realistic that if you are a veteran of Iraq or Afghanistan, give it about like 5 minutes or so and then come back, because I've actually heard that this game has triggered PTSD attacks in some people because it's a realistic enough game and it represents the situation well. So I'm just giving that warning right now to anyone who might have PTSD or anything like that. Come back in 5 minutes and then we'll be moving on from this. But this game called 6 Days in Fallujah is a crazy game based on the Battle of Fallujah, and it actually takes the accounts of veterans of the battle and pretty much puts their stories exactly into video game form, where you play out the stories of the soldiers, the Marines that fought in Fallujah, and it's insanely realistic with how it looks, how it plays, everything along those lines. It's a bizarrely accurate game. It's so accurate that the veterans themselves that interviewed for this game said that it is a lifelike recreation to the point that it gets every minor detail down. Everything. It's a really crazy kind of a game. It's really crazy to see how far video games have come in that degree. Because I remember back in the day, they were always extremely arcadey, and nowadays they get so realistic that if you walk over bricks, you end up tripping and you can't aim your gun. You have to literally be standing still to be able to aim at all, which is generally how it works in real life if you ever tried to shoot a gun. If you try and shoot a gun while walking or running, it's no good.
Yeah, it looks accurate. Just looking at the lighting and like the way they've set it up and the textures and stuff, it looks pretty elite.
Oh, it's a crazy good game. I played it with some friends before, and it is tough. It's a very unforgiving game. This game you will die more times than you will live in, because if you don't have an actual fire team of people playing the game with you that actually understand room clearing or urban combat tactics, you will end up getting killed a whole lot because
Also, by the way, you got somebody in the chat here, Jacob, who apparently did help the development team on some of the details for the game, plot itself, right here in the chat.
Oh, really? Let's see. Wow, that is actually really cool, Jacob. That's really neat to know. Yeah, then y'all did great work on this, because I've been hearing nothing but raving reviews about this game and how accurate it portrays the Battle of Fallujah. And I mean, it's almost picture perfect in a lot of ways when you look at pictures of the battle and then you look at what it looks like in the game. I mean, look at the city streets here. If I pull up a picture from the Battle of Fallujah, and I'll go pull one up really quickly, it looks identical. Let me see here. Here we go. So this is a picture from the game. This is what Fallujah looked like in real life. The similarities are uncanny. Very striking, really. But still, I thank you for being a part of that. Y'all put out pretty much a video game memorial, in a sense, to the Battle of Fallujah. And I actually have a great deal of respect for this game as well, because they have a campaign mode, which is actually, like, this is so cool, Matthew. They have a campaign mode in the game that literally guides you through the whole Battle of Fallujah, and it tells you about the history of the battles, and also gives you excerpts and stories from the real veterans telling you how the battle actually went through the part of the game that you're playing in. And I'm like, that is insane sort of honor that they made this game pretty much a memorial to all of their service and the battle itself. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat. This one goes to Duncan VR, another channel legend who puts in the 15. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that support. And it's good to see you once again. He said they're eating the dogs on Tuesdays, and let's break out the marmot.
And we will break out the marmot really quickly. Also, Mandy, I gotta say this. I don't know why, but it's been like blazing hot back here all night long. I'm actually like sweating profusely. But hello there.
Hey! Hello there. He said he's back there sweating in the hot box. He's back there hot boxing, but it's not the way it looks, Governor. It's no substances involved. It's just simply pure heat and sweat. That's all. At least he's not wearing a fur coat like a marmot. It's a blessing. Oh, it's a blessing. But anyways, what's that fly down there saying? Eh?
Aw, man. Aw, man. I got nothing to say anymore. Aw, man.
Oh
It's
dear, moaning and groaning. I tell you what, he acts like he's walking into mines, but he's not. He's just, loafing.
It's the Marmot segment. Everyone's howling the Marmot. And I gotta say, it's always great to have the Marmot segment here and there. And I gotta thank you for the support, Duncan VR. And also throwing in a little Marmot segment. And I also gotta say, they're eating the dogs on Tuesday. And then they bought more guns. But beyond that, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And someone said, "Holy shit, it's Tucker Carlson." That's being generous. But anyways, moving on to our next one here. Oh, that scared the hell out of me. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, "What the hell is that?" But anyways, our next super chat goes to John Bove, and he puts in a 10. He said, "Okay, I will help pay for food for the chat squirrel."
Hey, and we love to hear that you're paying for food for the chat squirrel. We love the chat squirrel, and I gotta thank you massively for the support and helping this thing to keep on running. Also, by the way, folks, I'm gonna have to start cutting down my responses to super chats a little bit because we're starting to get to where no matter what, we are gonna be running significantly overtime tonight. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to George Tencher, who puts in a 10. And George said, "Russia is more annoying." Oh my God, this one's terrible.
Oh,
George, what the hell are you throwing us in? A
George!
sidewinder right here. George, come on. I've never seen this out of you, George, but thank you very much for that $10 support. I can't read that comment off. It is too graphic, but thank you very much once again, George, for that support. He also, not also he, but also Jesus UCSB threw in a 10 once again. And he said, Jesus UCSB.
Hey, and a big thanks to you for support, Jesus UCSB, and helping this channel to keep on running because you are the LSA tanker of Vilseck, Germany, and I gotta thank you incredibly for being a part of this channel and helping it to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from the Playmaker 1271, who said, "I have a feeling that Putin isn't good info. He barely uses electronics or goes out in public for fear of his own life. This also tells me he wants to live." Also, that's a good observation. And also, isn't crazy enough to push the button. Also a good observation. I agree.
I would agree. And that's something that a lot of people never get. It's like, everyone's like, oh, all of these rich men, like this is like the thing in America. All these rich men, the senator's sons, they're going to kill us all with nukes. It's like, doesn't everyone realize they're also going to die as well? Like, they have giant targets on their heads. Like, if Russia is going to nuke anyone, whether it be the president, a senator, or you, they're going to go for the president or the senator and trying to nuke wherever they're going to be before they nuke you personally. And that's the thing that I don't think a lot of people realize is that we also do that same thing to the Russians. We have a giant target on wherever Putin's going to go for a ground burst. It's not going to be an air burst, it's going to be a ground burst, because if there's a bunker there, we want to get rid of it. So he's going to surely die. Putin will end up getting killed in a nuclear exchange. So he understands my chances of survival are incredibly low. And the President of the United States also probably understands my chances of survival are incredibly low. So nobody wants to push the nuclear button because obviously everyone wants to live. I mean, this guy is fighting to keep power inside of Russia. He purges people constantly, kills them to remain in power. Why in the world would he want to lose all of that power or possibly even lose his life in a nuclear war? No one wants to. So I generally think that we'll probably hop off of the escalation ladder before it gets to something like that, in my honest opinion. But a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Steve, who puts in a 10. And he said, "It's the orb." Honestly, I think that orb is living in infamy at this point because I still see it floating around the meme circles on the war pages. So apparently the Mosul orb, or also some people call it the Tehran. Yeah, the Tehran orb or the orb of judgment, something like that. There is some truth to it. I'll be honest with you. There is some truth to it that there is some unknown anomaly that we've seen in the Middle East before on footage that has been captured by military personnel. Nobody's really sure what it is, but I guess we'll have to let it remain a mystery. But thank you very much, Steve, for that support. We also have a 10 from Mike 8242 who put in a 10, and thank you, Mike, as well for that support, and we do appreciate that. We also have a 10 from Alex Johnson yet again. He said, "Fun fact," and a little off topic. Also, I think this might be a duplicate right here, Alex. I think I duplicated your super chat in the chaos earlier, but thank you very much once again. We also have a 5 from Gavin Ballard, and he said, "Hello, Enforcer," and Enforcer Matt.
Hey, and a big thank you for the hello, Gavin Ballard. And I hope you've been doing well tonight. And a big thanks to you for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Joshua A, and he said, "Look forward to another wonderful show, LSA and USA."
And LSA and USA. And a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Randy Smith, who puts in a 5. He said, is there any word that the Russian citizens are going to overthrow Putin?
We haven't gotten any word on that, and I'd be honest with you, I wouldn't be counting on it at this point. I don't think that'll be a high likelihood of happening at all. But a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Hands on Fire, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Hands on Fire, for that support as well. And I hope that you find some fire extinguisher for your hands, and we do appreciate that. We also have a 5 from Matt Helper. And Matt said, your assumptions on manufacturing the U.S. versus China is false. He said AI, robotics, and manufacturing, reducing labor costs 30%, Chinese labor up 10 times. Now, let me tell you something, Matt. I'm not an economist. I'm no expert, but that sounds wrong on his face. And no disrespect, but it sounds a little bit inaccurate. Moving manufacturing to America will always be more expensive than China because China does not have labor laws like the United States. In America,
Environmental regulations, too.
Yeah, that's true. But in the United States, we have a federal minimum wage. In China, I think they might have something similar, but it's so low, it's basically irrelevant. So you can pay people way, way less than you can pay them in America to do the same manufacturing job. And that's why the companies originally moved to China in the first place. And that's why they're trying to remain there if they can. So, I don't think there's any truth in reducing the labor costs. Even with the AI robotics and things like that, you're not going to reduce your labor costs that much to bring it back to America, in my personal opinion. At least for now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that if that was true, let's say it was true, if that was true, why are businesses not flooding to return back to the United States? Because if that statement was true and it made it that much cheaper, they would be flooding back in a wave because it would be economically viable and competitive to manufacture in America. And the truth of the matter is that stuff is about still 7 years ahead of us right now, and it doesn't exist, for one. And two, it also is not the case, at least for now. Because if that was the case, American products would be the cheapest out there in the world at a decent quality, and you would be able to see that American products are now beating out the Chinese. And that's just not the case really anywhere in the world right now. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I actually was going to bring up earlier that automation and AI could start to massively decrease the cost of manufacturing in America because you're not paying anyone any wages hardly at that point to manufacture here. But that's still a couple of years down the road. That's not something that exists today for sure. Because if you look at a Tesla factory, what are they manufacturing their cars with beyond super glue? It's people. It's automated, but still a lot of people involved in the assembly line. If you look at any other company in America right now, any auto manufacturer anywhere, and there's a lot of them in Alabama, what will you see? Let me show you this. What will you see outside of the Mercedes plant right here near Tuscaloosa? Lots of parking lots. For who? Well, that's not the AI robotic arm showing up to work. Those are the people working in the factory going to work right there in those parking lots. They store the cars back here. So those are workers up here. So, if that was the case, that AI and automation and robotics had taken over every factory, this parking lot would be empty. And it's pretty damn full, which tells me that there's a lot of employees working in this factory that are on a payroll, at least for now. But with that, a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Matt Helper once again, who puts in a 5. Matt Hepler. I think I've been saying his name wrong. It's Matt Hepler. And thank you very much, Hepler, there for that $5 support. I butchered the hell out of your name at this point. I'm sorry. But he said Anduril, Amazon, Deere are all examples of manufacturers using next-generation automation, AI robotics. Chinese products are shit. Apple's in the Stone Ages. What? No, not really. I mean, just because Apple's using, cheap labor, it doesn't mean they're in the Stone Ages. It's just assembly. Like the actual parts are not all made in China. It's just the assembly's done in China. So I don't think Apple's in the Stone Ages necessarily. Now, did they have maybe questionable practices? I would say yeah. But there's a bunch of companies out there that do that. They're not the only one, so it's not like they're unique. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to thank you for the support, but I would have to generally say that is not the case because Apple still holds the largest market share on global phone sales, like mobile phone sales. So that generally would be untrue just based off of market share value. So with that, I hope that has addressed that the best I can. A huge thanks to you for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Dan Leviton, who puts in a 5. He said alcohol tax and LSA support.
Hey, an LSA. And a big thanks to you for the support, Dan, and helping this channel to keep rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And a big shout out to Pat Powell, who puts in a 3, along with Matthew Ensign, who puts in a 2, and also Benjamin Murphy, who put in a 2. And thank you all 3 very much for that support, and we do appreciate that. We also have another 5 from Dan Leviton, who said, Marie MIA Surge.
And hopefully we'll be able to hear eventually what happened to Marie Elsie. I hope she was okay. She wasn't in the greatest of ways when we last heard of her on air, but hopefully things are still going okay and she's still hanging in out there somewhere. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that us addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one is a $5 support from Sunflower Gal. And thank you very much for the support, by the way, as well. They said, I usually hide in the shadows just watching, but I wanted to say thank you both for everything y'all do.
Hey, and thank you so much for a big thanks. And a big thank you for the support and the thanks. And a big thanks for the thanks of the thanks. And so with that, a huge thanks to you once again, Sunflower Gal, for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from Mamba Mentality, who puts in a 2. Like I said, he said, we broke YouTube. LOC, LOL.
And LSA, we did break YouTube, apparently. The live chat went so fast, it broke. That's at least what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say it's a YouTube glitch. I'm going to say we broke YouTube. That sounds better. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 2. He said, LSA hit the like button. That's an order.
Hey, and hit the like button, folks. That is an order. And we've actually gotten up to 4,500 likes tonight, which is a lot, a whole lot. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from Elka Sir, who says that India, excuse me.
Dang.
Hold on. Excuse me. Goodness gracious. But Elka Sir said that India is neutral right now, so not anti-West, I'd say.
I would say they're kind of leaning towards the anti-Western direction with that kind of statement made by their foreign ministry. I'd say they're almost leaning hard into bricks with that kind of a statement. Because to sit there and say, oh, you know, like, it's really hypocritical what India's doing, to be entirely honest with y'all, because they'll go, oh, the war in Russia, it's a terrible thing, and then they'll sit there on the same dime and then say, we'll kill every Pakistani just because they're Pakistani. You know, it's like, they're honestly kind of hypocritical with this whole thing, because they're sitting there saying, oh, look at all of y'all in the West, you're hypocrites. And it's like, well, y'all are kind of hypocritical as well, because y'all are trying to genocide the Pakistanis by denying them the water they need to live. So, you know, it's like, that's a little bit stupid, but beyond that, I do thank you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Honey Badger of Chaos, who puts in a 2. They said, good job, lads, and keep up the great work, and LSA.
Hey, and I gotta say, a big thanks to the Honey Badger of Chaos, and we will, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and we're on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from J40. He said, what about the US and EU still buying from Russia? What about that?
I would say that the European Union has been buying liquefied natural gas because some countries like Hungary aren't really wanting to adhere to the sanctions, and also others still don't have an economically viable alternative, at least at the moment. That would massively skyrocket the costs. And also the United States has very little to no trade with the Russians, and we only trade with them the stuff that we do not have, like uranium hexafluoride, which we use for nuclear power purposes. But generally, though, we've cut out most, if not all, trade with the Russians. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And Matthew put a quote down in the chat of what I said. That's a quote I'll die by right there. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one also goes to J40, who puts in a 2 once again. He said, are they siding with Russia or calling out hypocrisy?
I would say they're largely siding with the Russians because, you know, like, for example, with India, you know, it's like India doesn't like the Chinese because they're beating them to death with clubs up in the Himalayas, which is a true story. But yet they still do trade with the Chinese. So, you know, if India ever sat there and said, America, Papa America, you have to help us with the Pakistanis because they keep getting guns and weapons from the Chinese. We're going to sit there and go, help you with the Chinese. You're funding their war machine. You buy their goods, their Huawei phones, their Huawei phone plans. You buy everything from them. Get lost. You know, we could do the same thing. Like, to a sense, some of the stuff is hypocritical, yes, but every country in the world's hypocritical. I mean, you know, like, the Indians are trying to act like, oh, look at y'all. It's like, well, look at you. I mean, like, you know, look at what you're doing. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Vic the Red, who puts in a 2. He said 2 things in life are certain, taxes and death.
Absolutely. Amen. I love the IRS. Please spare me. But beyond that, I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, folks, due to time constraints tonight, we're going to be getting the Morse code decoders of the stream, 3 live chat questions, and then rounding this thing out. So, Matthew, what do we got?
And tonight's Morse code decoders are Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Airbell Garbo, Royal Fluffiness, and Kush. They said the Morse code says Russia is setting all of its ducks in a row to start a war in Europe. The message is clear. LLT LOC.
And ding! That is the sound of money, and y'all got that down on the nail. That is the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate the Least Spring Army Signal Corps for getting that correct time and time again, because y'all continuously show us that the Least Spring Army Signal Corps will never be duped, and y'all will always get the Morse code message. Very impressive stuff. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Sheffield from the live chat. They said, what do you think would happen if they arrested Witkoff tomorrow at the negotiations and Russia took him into custody?
Oh, that'd be hell to pay. Because he has diplomatic amnesty for the large part. It's understood that he's there as the messenger, pretty much. So if you, quote-unquote, kill the messenger by arresting him, oh, hell, that would be all hell breaking loose at that point. Honestly, we actually would probably go to war over that because he's the official representative of the whole country. So if he's being arrested, not only is that a massive insult, that's pretty much violating the kind of diplomatic goodwill that he arrived on, because obviously he didn't just show up in Russia unannounced. He was most likely invited or requested by the Russians to show up, or at least they allowed him to show up. So if they arrest him, it's going to be nasty business. Honestly, America would get to, like, to put it in the truth of the fact, America would get to killing pretty quickly on that one, because that would be a grievous offense, and not only that, that's pretty much a declaration of war in itself to treat our diplomats that poorly. And honestly, I'd say at that point, it sure as hell is. Like, whether or not I think Witkoff is a competent negotiator or not, he is the representative of the United States. He's the special envoy. So if they went and did something like that, I mean, hell, I would say go enlist tomorrow, because we're going to be going over there for sure at that point. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And our next one goes to Savage Warlock. He said, it seems like Russia is trying to tease the U.S. into getting more personally involved in the war. And what say you?
I would say that they're not really trying to tease us. It's that we've tried to force them to end the war, and they're trying to find some way to go about pretty much saying no, but in a way that doesn't escalate it, but they're escalating it unintentionally, to be entirely honest. So that would generally be my approach on it. But Matthew, what are you thinking about that?
Me personally, I would say that Russia is not trying to tease the U.S. into a war, because Russia is not going to win that war. I mean, if you look at it from a conventional standpoint, they're definitely going to lose, because if they go up against any NATO country, they go up against the whole alliance. They're going to lose that. Putin's even said that out of his own mouth. And then if they try to fall back on their nuclear deterrence and their nuclear defense, then everybody's going to lose. Everybody's going to go down in that. Nobody's going to win it, obviously, because you have a nuclear a war that breaks out because of it. So they have no reason to try to drag the U.S. into a war. Now, the only reason they might do it is if Putin gets crazy enough that he thinks in his head that Russia is about to collapse. He's about to lose his position in the government, and he's thinking, I'm going down, so I'm going to take everybody down with me, and he tries to attack NATO as a way to try to last-ditch save his whole presidency at that point. That's the only situation I see him actually doing it. Outside of that, though, Russia will probably try to avoid the war at all costs with NATO, because they're going to lose it.
And I would generally agree with that, honestly. I think you and me are almost saying the same thing there. And so with that, it is time for us to move on to the final question of that. Also, by the way, I hope that answered the question well, because pretty much both of us answered it in the same way, but with different words. But with that, it's time for us to move on to the final question of the night. And so with that, who was like last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be Taylor McLean, who said, what do you guys think about the U.S. building a nuclear reactor on the moon? Now, here's my thing, Taylor, about that. Why are we building a nuclear reactor on the moon? I mean, I thought we had a thing where we weren't supposed to be, like, going to the moon and building stuff on it. I don't know if there's, like, a treaty that formalized that or not. But even if we don't have a treaty and we're perfectly allowed to build a nuclear reactor on the moon, what is the point? Because I haven't really heard the logic behind it. Isn't there a lot more things that we need to tend to, like, domestically? Like, for example, the fact that Americans can't afford to buy groceries or buy a car or buy a house or even live. Like, shouldn't we be tending to that first instead of building a nuclear reactor on the moon? It seems a little out of touch, if you ask me. I'm not trying to be political. That's just, you know, it's kind of like honestly pissing me off at this point. It's so abstract about the nuclear reactor thing. I think they ought to pay attention to issues that probably actually matter, like accountability. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh man, the reactor on the moon, the ballroom at the White House. I mean, honestly, and man, I'll be honest with you, man. The nuclear reactor one is pretty goofy, but the ballroom at the White House, I was like, really? I was like, out of all the times that we could have done something like this, it's right
He's
now.
paying for it though. He says he's paying for
But
it. So I mean that takes some of the pain away. But at the same time though, I'm like, the White House is like historic, man. Like this, it's not something that we're supposed to just like add on to like it's somebody's mansion or something. It's like it's the White House. I'm personally not a fan of like tampering with things. Now if you're doing something like you're adding on to the basement, like where you can't see it and it really doesn't change the structure, then go for it. Like they've done renovations before, but don't mess up the whole aesthetic by trying to do something unique. It's not about that. It's supposed to be historic.
well, you know what's crazy? I'm just going to be a little bit honest here, folks. The White House has only ever been expanded historically to allow for more staff for the office of the president because it's not really a residence, it's more so a giant office space. So, this is the first expansion ever since the original building was built and completed in 1803 that is entirely for living or vanity reasons because the rest of them were entirely more so business oriented. The Oval Office in the West Wing is the entirety of the Oval Office is a office for the president to operate out of, and it's also a place for the press to accumulate. And then over here on the East Wing, that's generally staff. It's mostly staff related stuff over there, and then the White House itself is also some offices and then residential living spaces. So and also another thing I gotta say, it's gonna throw the symmetry off because they're adding this thing to the East Wing. So the East Wing's now gonna be the full height of the normal White House, and then the West Wing's just gonna be this little limp noodle, still 1 floor tall wing. So now the whole thing is going to be lopsided and unsymmetrical. So it's like, now do we build this giant extension over here to make it symmetrical? And then does it almost look like a palace at that point instead of the White House? I don't know. I'll be honest with y'all. I don't like the idea of adding anything onto the White House that isn't business related. Because it's like, isn't the whole job of the President of the United States and the symbolism behind the White House is that it's mostly all business related instead of, a ballroom? Like, what the hell is this? This isn't Versailles. Like, we're not having a ball here. King Louis XVI doesn't live here. This is the president, and the president's going to be gone in a couple of years. So we're instead of having official state dinners now, we're going to have balls. I don't even get it. Like, I honestly don't get that at all. But
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're gonna have balls now. We're gonna have balls.
yeah, we're gonna have balls. We're gonna have great big balls in the White House. Like that's a great idea. I don't even get it. I don't even get it. But the nuclear reactor on the moon one sounds ridiculous to me because it's not. They didn't even lay out a grander plan to it. Like we're going to start, conducting some sort of resource mining from the moon or something along those lines. It's just literally to have a nuclear reactor there to power nothing, and it's like, well, what's the point of that? Like I don't even get it. There's no infrastructure need for the thing even. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. But I hope I answer that the best I can. But beyond that, I hope y'all all enjoyed the stream tonight. It is now 3 hours and 43 minutes into the stream, and there are still 7,000 people here. That's absolutely crazy, because not that long ago, that would have been the peak of the stream, and now that's the lowest part of the viewership where we're getting off the air. But I've got to thank you all so much, all 7,000 of y'all who are still here, for being here right now, and I've got to thank the 14.3 thousand people who were here at the peak for watching, and I also got to thank the 160,000 people who have watched the stream since it went live for watching as well. It's an absolute honor and a privilege to be able to cover this news for all of y'all each and every single day, and I've got to thank you all incredibly for being here with us tonight. If you did enjoy, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, long live the Republic, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us yet again tonight. And also apologies for all the technical glitches tonight. Hopefully that is sorted out tomorrow. Unfortunately, that's nothing we can control on our end, but hopefully the people that can control it, hopefully they get a grip on it. And also, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern on the Nightly War News stream, and also on the Midday War video as well. If there is enough news to cover, the Enforcer will be doing that one tomorrow. And a huge shout out to all 161,000 people that were here by the end of the stream. And we'll see you all tomorrow. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Hero Slava, get some rest, and good night.